Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing great. Welcome back to the Anime Fictions 2.0. Today, we're diving into part 2 of What If Naruto Konohas Lost Soul. One decision, one technique, and everything changes. If you enjoy alternate timelines and stories that push canon in unexpected directions, make sure to subscribe, share the video with your friends, and check out the other videos on the channel. And as always, drop your thoughts in the comments. I love reading your ideas. Now, without any more delay, let's jump straight into the story. Chapter 16: Ashes to Ashes. Naruto stood in the archway where the hallway opened up from its narrow passage onto a slightly more open part of the hallway that had the exit/entrance to the eastern courtyard and another entrance/exit to the Hyuga's private gardens. Blocking his passage were the 5 heads of Konoha's most renowned clans. Uzumaki. Some breathed out as her loyal companion. Kadamura growled and snarled at the boy in red. Naruto looked at them with an intensely disinterested gaze before he spoke. Akimichi, Nara, Yamanaka, and Izuka. The 4 of you need not die here. You need only to swear loyalty to me, and my cause, and you will be allowed safe passage away from this compound. Should you prove yourselves trustworthy, then I will allow you to once again take the position of clan heads of your respective houses. And Hayashi? Shurikato asked, narrowing his eyes slightly. Naruto's gaze flickered to the pale-eyed clan head. He is too dangerous to be left alive, was his simple answer. Shurikato mentally cursed. Hayashi was indeed the only true threat to the blonde. Not in raw power, he doubted anyone short of one or both of the remaining, or Uchiha Itachi had any real hope of defeating this monstrosity that they had created. Hayashi's threat was in the political realm. Shurikato knew that no matter how much pull or influence he had in certain circles of shinobi, that no one had the kind of political pull like Hayashi. Where the blonde held his force together by grudging respect, fear, or people who were indebted to him, Hayashi held his force together by 3 things. 1. The natural prestige he possessed as the Hyuga clan head, diminished as they may be. 2. His calculative mind. And 3rd is the fact that many believed him to be the last hope of defeating the blonde before he started yet another great war. Shurikato knew also that should they submit to him, that he would limit, or downright remove all of their political power, meaning that the chances of one of them coming close to organizing a revolt would be nigh impossible. So in reality, this was it. This was a make-it-or-break-it effort to keep their children from having to suffer the horrors of war. He weighed his options. Should they fail or surrender, then Naruto would no doubt pursue his ambition, and eventually fail when 2 of the villages unite against his now diminished one, which would lead to the destruction of the Hidden Leaf and all of its inhabitants, including their children. Or they could make a stand, have the possibility of failing but also have the possibility of winning, where then they could name a new Kaige, unite the village again and work on undoing the damage that this short, but nonetheless destructive, civil war had caused. Hayashi spoke up, narrowing his pale eyes to a fearsome glare. Fool boy. You cannot hope to defeat us here. We are 5 of Konoha's strongest shinobi. You are strong, true, remarkably so, but even you have no chance of defeating all 5 of us. Some spoke up next. Not only that, but our clan techniques complement each other. The Hyuga and Inuzuka have been paired in teams practically since the founding of our clans, and the Ino-Shikacho trio is legendary. Naruto spoke, his voice a drawl of simple facts. Inuzuka clan techniques are based around close-range combat. Weaknesses are mid to long-range techniques, usually earth-type manipulators. Hyuga also focuses on close-range techniques. Weaknesses: a blind spot just along the base of the neck. Akimichi, also close-range fighters. Weaknesses: techniques use up great amounts of chakra and are extremely slow. Yamanaka clan techniques, involving the mind mid to close-range techniques. Weaknesses is that the caster will either fall unconscious, or must remain perfectly still while the jutsu is being cast. The moves vary slowly as well. And finally, the Nara clan's strengths are the unusually high IQs as well as the ability to paralyze an opponent using shadows. Weaknesses are that they have naturally low chakra capacities and the paralysis uses greater amounts of chakra the stronger the opponent. Did I leave anything? The 5 clan heads' facial expressions visibly tightened. When they had created him, trained him, they had given him everything. They had laid out all of Konoha's knowledge, all of its techniques. The techniques of the clans and their weaknesses. In the hopes of creating the perfect weapon, one that could help any of the clans, or who could destroy any that might have gone rogue. but in the process they forgot one thing. When handling any weapon there was always a risk of gaining serious injuries. Hayashi growled and spat out his next words. You still do not have a chance. Your theories are good, but let's see you put them into practice. Naruto spoke again, his voice hollow and dead even as his red eyes gleamed beneath his hood. While it is true that I would have no chance at defeating you if I was a normal shinobi, we all know that I am far from normal. The 5 clan heads tensed as the red chakra grew in intensity. The bloodlust and rage rolling off of the beast's power was almost suffocating. Naruto spoke again, his red eyes flashing beneath his hood and glowing with an eerie light. The will of the shadow guides me. The strength of the demon empowers me. You cannot prevail. His voice grew darker then, the voice-altering device making it sound more like a feral growl of some animal. Chuza, having had enough, rushed the blonde and aimed a massive fist towards him. But Naruto merely leapt straight up, busting a hole through the ceiling where Tsum and Kadamaru soon followed up after him. The Inuzuka clan had barely had time to land on the ceiling before she heard a voice coming from above. Kaze no Yaiba. She snapped her head up just as a crescent-shaped wind blade headed straight towards her. She couldn't leap off the roof before the chunk she had been standing on fell as the wind blade cut through wood and stone, sending her crashing down into the other 4 clan heads. Naruto then formed his next set of hand seals. Katon, Ryuka no! He yelled, shooting out 6 fireballs. 5 hit the roof of the house, and the last was aimed to go into the opening he had made. Just as the ball of flames was about to enter the building and fry the remaining occupants, a shout was heard from the inside. Katon! A whole chunk of the house's east wing was blown to bits, flaming debris and splinters of wood exploding everywhere. Somehow, Hayashi had managed to form the Katon to move around the others, yet still make it powerful enough to push away the attack. Naruto landed and then had to leap back as Chuza attacked, his fists the size of giant mallets. His feet touched the ground again as Hayashi appeared in front of him, his movements fast and precise, his juken stance practically perfect. Naruto moved from side to side, avoiding the man's attacks rather easily when he heard a bark behind him. He turned in time just to barely catch Kadamaru's form as he barreled into him, spinning with Inuzuka's signature tsuga. He managed to mold chakra into his back, just in time to avoid most of the serious damage, reducing the tearing, bludgeoning force to a strong impact. Hihashi, having seen the dog's attack before the blonde due to his Byakugan, leapt back just as the dog hit the Jinchuriki, sending the ninja straight for him. He began spinning. Katon! Naruto slammed into the defensive technique, sent spinning through the air. He managed to gain his bearings and looked in time to see himself heading towards the Akimichi. Chuza's fists were reared back, ready to deliver a clapping motion that would no doubt crush him between the ridiculously proportioned hands. He timed his maneuver and placed his palm on the earth, bringing himself to a screeching halt, practically laying on the floor as Chuza's hands clapped together, loudly above his head. He pushed himself off the floor, somersaulting backwards. He landed behind the Akimic clan head. He grabbed the man by his hair, pulling him back while he himself moved forward and delivered a brutal kick to his spine. Chuza's mouth opened with a silent scream of pain. Naruto reared back his blade, poised to deliver the killing blow when he realized that he suddenly couldn't move. His blood-red eyes shifted to the shadow that connected with his eyes then shifted to the struggling Shurikato, as he pulled more of the volatile red chakra from his seal. Shurikato fell to one knee, grunting in exertion. Sweat dabbed his forehead. Inoichi! He panted. Hurry the fuck up! He managed to gasp out as the red chakra struggled against his. Right, the blonde-haired member of the team spoke as he finished his hand seals. His form didn't slump, but the spike in the blonde-haired man's chakra indicated the attack had been sent. Naruto forcefully pulled out more of Kyuubi's chakra from the seal, the red violent chakra thrashing against Shikato's hold. He could feel Inoichi's attack getting closer and closer. He could not grant the full control of his mind. The results for both of them would be less than pleasing. His salvation came in a rather surprising yet painful form. Chuza, having managed to gain his bearings, felt the rather strong grip on his hair that Naruto still had and spun around. Acting on instinct, he lashed out, growing his arm to ridiculous proportions. The enlarged appendage slammed into Naruto's side, sending him flying, while also cracking a few ribs. This, however, proved to be a real problem for one Nara Shurikato, as he too felt the effects of the attack. While he didn't go flying, he did feel the snapping of his ribs. Naruto landed on all fours, grunting slightly as he focused Kyuubi's chakra, hearing the sound of snapping bones slightly muffled. He knew they were healed again, but that didn't mean Shukato was all right. The scarred man was clutching his side with a dribble of blood coming from the corner of his mouth. Naruto stood but felt a rumble beneath his feet. He managed to shift his position to the side just in time to avoid Kodamaru, as he emerged from the ground already using Atsuga. He was unable to completely avoid some, however, as the Inu Kunoichi came from the ground behind him. He managed to dodge somewhat, but the clan had knocked away his sword and delivered 3 jagged claw-like slashes across his chest. He grunted and kicked Kodamaru as the dog lunged at him from behind. Some landed on the ground. He was slightly behind her to her left. She spun around, trying to deliver an elbow to his face with her left arm. He blocked it almost lazily. She tried again. This time with her right arm, he blocked again. Now gripping both her elbows in his hand, he roughly jerked his hands downwards, now gripping her wrists, and twisted her arms behind her back. The woman grit her teeth, refusing to cry out. A sickening pop sound was heard and her left shoulder bone seemed to move beneath her skin, indicating it was now dislocated. A gasp of pain escaped her. He didn't let up, and her resistance with her right arm increased, not wanting it to suffer the same pain as its twin. Snaps and crunches were heard as his grip tightened around her left wrist. It was now, no doubt, broken. She still didn't cry out, nor did the resistance in her right arm falter for a second. Her teeth were gritted against her lower lip so much that blood appeared. Naruto was forced to release her, however, as Hayashi dashed onto the scene, his taijutsu, again fast and deliberate. Naruto pushed chakra into his gauntlets, blocking the famed gentle fist with precision and sureness of one who knew the style inside out. Hayashi gnashed his teeth as again a palm thrust to the boy's shoulder was diverted, followed by another to his upper chest, and again to his stomach. He was using all the speed he could muster, and yet still this boy was batting him away like nothing more than a mere fly. Finally, after several more blows were exchanged between the two, it paused in a deadlock, as Naruto gripped Hayashi's wrist, stopping him from striking at his heart with an open palm thrust, and Hayashi did the same, gripping Naruto's metal-covered hand as the gauntlet's claws were poised to puncture through his chest cavity. Hayashi's brow creased with effort. His years spent off the front line had dulled him some. The boy's physical strength was superior to his experience, though, was leveling the playing field. Naruto growled low in his throat. His crimson eyes danced with the embers of the flames as they locked onto Hayashi's pulsing Byakugan. The two tore their gazes away from each other as a rumbling sound reached his ears. Naruto and Hayashi looked to the side as they saw Chusa rolling towards them. His fiery red mane of hair was now longer and stronger, giving him more traction, speed, and cutting ability. Hayashi leapt back, and Naruto knew Chusa would follow him, and would eventually lead him into Shikato's cage main, as he could see the man fighting through the pain in order to form the seal in preparation for the jutsu. Thinking fast, he did the only thing he knew would keep him out of the cage main. He leapt up and landed atop the rolling Chusa. His shadow was connected directly to the larger man's. If Shikato tried to hold him, he would stop Chusa as well. He pushed chakra into his feet to keep the sharp hairs from cutting them and walked on the rolling ball like a giant hamster wheel. A battle cry to his right caught his attention. He turned, still keeping his balance, and saw Inoichi approaching with 2 kunai. He raised his gauntlet-covered fist. A clang of metal was heard as he used one gauntlet to block one kunai and caught the man's wrist with the other. Throwing him aside, he managed to turn in time to block Tsume's attack, her now sharpened claws swiping away at him. If only for the sake of his stability on the roiling meat tank that was Chusa, Naruto kept his ground, refusing to move back at all. He was lucky that he had the center of the rolling pinball, unlike Tsume and Inoichi, as they both had been standing on the edges of him, a much more difficult area to keep a good footing on. Which was revealed as Tsume lost her footing and fell forward. Naruto seized the opportunity. Raising his knee up, she slammed right into his toughened kneecap with enough force to send her up, and falling onto her back instead of her stomach. But he wasn't finished. He raised his metallic hand, the nail-like claws on the piece of armor ready to pierce her like a stuffed pig when Kodamaru lunged at him, the canine's fangs biting deep into his forearm. He growled. Using his other arm, he latched onto the annoying dog's throat, and with a horrible crunch, his bite slackened. Naruto threw him aside like an old rag. He turned again, this time kicking away Naruto Shurikato before he could deliver whatever attack he wished. He turned again, this time coming once again, face to face with Hyuga Hayashi. The wielder of the famed all-seeing eye managed to deliver a hard palm thrust. He felt his stomach clench and spasm as wounds appeared on his navel. He coughed up blood, the coppery liquid staying on his lips and dripping through the bottom of the face mask. However, this momentary opening allowed Hayashi to gain a better footing on the rolling Akimichi as Naruto was forced back. Again the two exchanged blows, blocking and parrying as required while trying to seize openings in the other's attacks or defenses. However, their exchange was cut off as Chuza slammed into one of the walls of the clan estate, catapulting both off of him, along with chunks of wood and boulders that made up the wall. Naruto righted himself in mid-air and turned, gaining momentum. He swung his leg, slamming it into a rock the size of a footrest or small coffee table. The large stone was rocketed towards the enlarged Akimichi, slamming right into his side. Though the thickened hair took the brunt of the attack, his transformation was undone. He rolled on the ground a few times before coming to a dazed stop. Naruto then spun around again in midair, with the use of his wind chakra, and kicked the Hyuga clan head right in the ribs with a brutal drop kick, sending him crashing into the burning estate. Suga! Some slammed right into his back, the full force of the Inuzuka's signature attack catching him off guard. The woman's claws tore away at him, his blood seeping from the newly created wounds. He was shot down into the building, into a different part of the compound from where Hayashi had fallen. As he hit the floor, he ignored the flames around him and rolled forward, getting to his feet and unsheathing his sword. Some fell through a moment later. Her features are feral and her eyes lit up with fury, the thought of her now dead partner Kodamaru adding to her rage. She saw a shadow slip off down the hallway. The flames burning the compound were affecting her vision, and the smoke was getting in the way of her sense of smell. The sound of burning would also affected her hearing. But she paid no heed to this in her anger and rushed after the shadow. When she reached the end of the hall and turned, her eyes widened at the collapsed hallway. She hadn't heard a crash, so that meant it was there before. No one could have gotten past that. She heard a slight sizzling sound and looked down to a small exploding tag. She leapt back, but couldn't avoid the blast entirely. The shrapnel and splinters pierced her arms as she crossed them in front of her in hopes of blocking it. She fell back into the hallway. She opened her eyes and saw another exploding tag on the ceiling directly above her. Her eyes widened before the tag went off and the ceiling collapsed overhead. Naruto emerged from the shadows of the hallway, his form like a specter. Flames danced around his feet and seemed to part for him, allowing passage as he approached the fallen clan head. Sum's breasts were ragged and uneven. A jagged pipe fell from the ceiling and had pierced the right side of her chest. She was visibly struggling to keep breathing. Her eyes were dilated and unfocused. As she approached, she turned her fading eyes onto him. Somehow, she had managed to gather the strength to speak. "Please," she gasped. "Stop this, it will end in failure." And as such, she gasped her last. Naruto stared at the woman. His red eyes, though burning with unholy flames from the demon's chakra, were cold and unflinching as he stared at her now dead form. He said nothing as he stepped past her, down the hallway. Flames would consume the remains and leave nothing but ash. Shurikato and Inoichi staggered over to the large form of one Akimichi Chuza. The overly large man groaned weakly as his two comrades helped him into a sitting position. "Ugh, what happened?" "The Uzumaki managed to hit you with a big rock and threw Hayashi into the estate. Some hit him and he also fell into the house." She followed after him. The large Akimichi managed to stand. "Damn it, what the hell are you two doing helping me? We have to save her," he said angrily. The other two stood and together they began running towards the house. An explosion sound reached them, making them run faster than a second explosion hit. When they were finally leaping away from the roof, the entire wall exploded in a great blast. The three crossed their arms in front of themselves in order to block the debris and shield their eyes from the heat. When they looked up again, the fear in their hearts multiplied as they stared at Naruto standing above the burning ruins. Crimson flames seemed to tower behind him, like a great wall from hell itself, his face, invisible, beneath his hood. His blade gleamed in red light. Chuza felt fear grip his heart at his next question. "Somewhere is Tsum?" Naruto remained silent before he responded. "Dead." His fist cracked as he clenched them. His rage was almost visible in his eyes as well as the eyes of Inoichi and Shurikato. "You fucking monster. He was almost frothing at the mouth. Some had been a good friend of his for many years. I'll kill you. His voice was a hateful whisper, but became an enraged yell. You fucking bastard, I'll kill you! In a second, Chuza had placed the first of his clan pills into his mouth. His chakra tripled and Naruto's eyes momentarily widened in surprise. He pulled out a full tail of the Kyuubi's chakra to supplement his own power until he would still be above the Akimichi's chakra output. He was surprised, however, at the extreme speed boost the red-haired Akimichi had as the man appeared next to him and delivered a solid fist to his face. It hurt. A lot. Naruto flew to the side of the building, his back cracking as bones gave way. He grunted and again felt Kyuubi's chakra mend and heal, even as the bone fragments remained in his back. Before he could move, Chuza was upon him, his fists flying, hitting his right cheek, then his left, then his right, his left again. His face mask shattered, showing his bruised cheeks that were quickly healing. His mouth opened to take in air, showing broken and knocked out teeth which he quickly spit out lest he choke. New teeth regenerated quickly. Chuza, seeing the damage he delivered completely undone in mere seconds, screamed in rage. Growing his right hand out, he slammed it into the blonde, pinning him against the wall, using the full weight of the Akimichis to crush him against the wood splinters and concrete rubble. Naruto struggled to breathe, his breath coming out in short, quick pants as the Akimichi continued to crush him. His ribs soon snapped under the strain, coming dangerously close to his heart and piercing his lungs. He focused as best he could, forming and molding the red chakra as it formed tendrils that went over Chuza's hand and stabbed into his forearm, trying to push him back. The red-haired man screamed and struggled against the pain, trying to continue pushing down on the blonde as the red chakra began pushing him off. Akimichi cursed and put the second pill in his mouth as Naruto's chakra tendrils spread and pierced his stomach and legs. His muscles doubled in size and his chakra output tripled. He ignored the injuries and crushed him with renewed vigor. Naruto grit his teeth and again struggled to breathe. As he attempted to take another breath, he suddenly felt a grip tighten on his neck. He snapped his eyes open and shifted his eyes down, seeing a shadow clenching around his neck. He felt the edges of his vision grow dark. Inoichi! Fry this fucker's brain! Chuza yelled, coughing up blood. The blonde-haired man nodded before forming another set of hand seals. Naruto felt the presence enter his mind. His eyes rolled to the back of his head as he finally passed out. Chuza, Shurikato, and Inoichi each breathed a sigh of relief. Just before they each felt his chakra spike again. The three teammates looked at the blonde as his head snapped up, his hood falling back revealing his blonde hair and crimson eyes. Yet these eyes were different. Where once they held nothing but cold apathy, now they were dancing with sick insanity and bloodlust. His teeth shined as a psychotic grin spread across his features, his fangs growing until they were practically touching his lower lip. His chakra spiked again, and the Akimichi suddenly screamed in pain as red chakra spikes exploded from the blonde's entire body, piercing his arm with the jagged thorns. He cursed and was about to place the third and final pill in his mouth when Naruto appeared in front of him and harshly grabbed him by the mouth, pulling the taller man down so he was at eye level. He chided, his insane grin widening before he plunged his fists through the man's chest. Chuza gave a small jerk before his form slackened. Inoichi and Shikato's eyes were wide in horror as they saw their friend's body tossed aside. The Kyuubi's Jinchuriki's smile never left his face as he turned to them. The flames behind him once again covered his face in shadow. Only his softly glowing eyes and wicked smile were visible. He slowly brought his blood-covered gauntlet up to his lips and licked some of the crimson liquid off of it. His insane grin never leaves. I must thank you, humans. Had you not weakened him, I would have never been allowed free. It's been so very long since I've tasted human blood. Shurikato and Inoichi's eyes widened in pure terror. Kyuubi? The shadow user asked. The demon chuckled. The fear he could feel coming from them was almost palpable, filling his senses. He savored it like a fine wine, enjoying every second of it. Correct, human, the stress on his body, and especially his mind, was far too much for him to handle at one time. Giving me temporary control, at least till he recovers. I must thank you especially for that, human. He gestured to Inoichi. Were it not for your mind attack, his defenses would have never weakened enough for me to take over. He laughed as Inoichi seemed to pale. Now then, I have a limited amount of time. He threw off his gauntlets and took a stance, His natural claws spread wide as if he was leaving them an opening. He licked his bloodied fangs, enjoying the metallic coppery taste. And I want to make the most of it. Hayashi groaned as his mind returned to the conscious realm. He clutched his head and stumbled slightly as he stood. His eyes blearily looked around before he regained his bearings, noticing he was in the south wing of the compound. The building was burning all around him. The roof collapsed behind him. He jumped and turned around. He looked up and saw a silhouette of a human, hidden by shadows, glowing eyes and gleaming fangs glaring back at him. He took out some kunai and threw them, but the figure merely vanished as the knives hit him. Hayashi activated his Byakugan. Again a sound was heard behind him, close. Too close in fact he spun around, in time to see a shadow run into a room. He dashed after it, but as he was going to enter the doorway a small explosion collapsed the hallway. He jumped back and felt the bite as 3 claws slashed his side. He gasped and held his wound, gritting his teeth. He took a slight step back where the floor gave way. He stumbled, falling on his back, and stood up again, hearing laughing sounds coming from all around him. He stood and glared, looking all around the hall for any sign of him. "Show yourself, you're a coward!" he yelled. "As you wish." Hayashi gasped, spun around, was grabbed by his throat and slammed into the wall. He gasped, trying to breathe. He struck in his arm and struck his chest, hoping to loosen the boy's grip. He looked down at the sick grin on the boy's face. Foolish Hyuga. I'll enjoy this," the fox said with sick glee before twitching his wrist to jerk the man's head to the side, exposing the base of his neck. The Hyuga head's eyes widened as the boy moved in and bit down at the junction between his neck and his shoulder, biting deep into the artery. He gurgled once before the blonde yanked with his teeth, pulling a whole chunk from his neck. Blood fountained from the injury, hissing as it met the burning wood. He died seconds later as the demon fox savored the taste. My fun is almost over, I see," he said to himself as the edges of his eyes began to turn blue. "I hope you enjoy what I drank, fool boy." The eyes turned blue completely and a fierce scowl formed on his features. He spat out the blood and wiped it with his sleeve. "Damnable creature!" he snarled, both at his lack of control and the disgusting taste in his mouth. He stared at the dead clan head for a moment before he turned and left, leaving the body to the flames. From Ashes to Ashes. Chapter 17, The Aftermath Part 1. It had been 3 days since the end of the Konoha Civil War. The list of dead were in the hundreds. The list of wounded hadn't been compiled yet. After the defeat of the Hyuga clan, Naruto organized whatever troops he could and placed them on guard duty in and around Konoha to keep any from leaving, and to keep spies from entering. The longer he could keep news of the Civil War under wraps, the better. It came as something of a surprise that the boon that Naruto had was granted by Danzo's death, however. The dead had been gathered by the survivors of Danzo's root Umbu, a group which was far easier to keep in line now that the old war hawk was dead. They were also quite obedient now that they had no master to follow. They were fast becoming Naruto's primary Black Ops specialist. He was tasking them above most to keep the reports of the carnage he had caused under wraps, especially that of the clan heads. He had also acted accordingly, accepting missions no lower than C rank and no greater than B rank to keep the currency flowing while hiding the ninja he was assigning the missions as Chunin, when in reality they were Umbu and Jounin from both his faction and the surviving root Umbu. While their currency had been cut nearly by half of their former intake, Naruto estimated that if they could keep word of their condition a secret for at least 2 weeks, the next stages of his plan could be taken into action. He stood from his chair in what had now unofficially become his office, the Hokage's office. So as not to stir up unwanted resentment from some of the remaining citizens, he had decided to wait before declaring himself the Gondame. He remembered what had happened just the other day when he had stepped into this office again after the Hyuga estate. Jiraiya had been waiting for him, his clothes slightly torn and bloody from the battle he had been involved in. Flashback. The Toad stared at the blonde teenager's slightly disheveled appearance, and tossed him a hat that was on the table beside him. Naruto caught the piece of headwear with a lazy hand and stared at it blankly, the symbol of fire staring right back at him. He looked back at the Toad. "Congratulations," he said simply. Naruto said, staring at the symbol for a good long while, not really knowing what to say or feel. The Toad stood and walked up to the blonde. Placing an arm onto his shoulder, he spoke seriously. I think if you ever feel like you don't know what to do, just ask yourself what would he do in this situation. And the answer will come to you. That said, he continued walking, opening and closing the door with a soft click. Flashback in. He looked over to the hat that rested at a stand. He stood and walked over to it. He took the article of clothing and stared at it again for a few moments. Am I worthy of this? He silently contemplated. He walked to the balcony and stared out at the city of Konoha. He remembered that he had done this once before. A few years ago, when Sarutobi was still in office. Back then the streets were vibrant with life. Now, however, it was all but barren. People stayed in their homes, fear keeping them in place. He narrowed his eyes slightly at that. He turned and replaced the hat again on its stand. Not yet. He turned and sat down at the desk. No, he would not wear it yet. Hinata, Hanabi, and several Hyugas that were formerly from the branch house stared at the charred remains that was once the pristine estate of the mighty Hyuga clan. Now reduced to a smoking, blasted ruin. Hinata knelt and wiped some ashes from a picture on the floor before picking it up. Seeing it was a picture of one of the branch members, she set it on the night table, leaving it there for whoever might want it. She silently walked through the halls of the estate, her sister and 2 other branch members following her. She was now the clan head, something she was forcing her mind to wrap itself around. She moved past the splinters that remained of the door that led into the council chamber of the Hyuga elders. Bloodstains and slash marks, as well as small craters caused by explosive notes, marred the inside of the circular chamber. She looked at the walls for a long while, seemingly in silent contemplation. Hanabi looked down sadly. It seems so much colder now, she remarked, rubbing her left forearm. One of the older branch members, a man in his mid-60s with thinning gray hair and short goatee, spoke. Yes, it does seem so. Another, even older man spoke up. He had a bushy mustache and large beard that reached his chest. His name was Kojihiro. It is not as it was, he remarked, walking up the stairs with the sound of his cane hitting the white marble floor echoing from the walls. No, it isn't, Hinata said, kneeling and picking up a small stone and pushing it aside, revealing a white flower that had survived the massacre. She smiled sadly. But perhaps that is for the best. Kurenai's eyes were slightly teary as she walked into the hospital room of one Sarutobi Asuma. Machines were hooked up to him, and his face was incredibly pale. His head was mostly wrapped in bandages, only the left side was visible. His 2 arms were in casts, as well as a brace to keep his waist from shifting, along with a cast on his left ankle and right femur. She shed some tears looking down at him in this state. She let her eyes travel to the clipboard at the edge of his bed. Name, Sarutobi Asuma. Rank, Jounin. Age, 28. Severe concussion, fracture in the left collarbone, both forearms suffering multiple fractures, left hip bone has been shattered along with the left ankle and right femur. Current condition, comatose. Expected time of recovery, unknown. She let her tears fall down her pale cheeks before walking over and sitting down on one of the chairs, letting her hand grip his. He did not respond. Oh, fuck me! That was the cry of pain that tore its way out of the throat of one Yumino Irika as Anko rebroke his left forearm, which had been placed back together by an amateur medic nun who had done a piss-poor job of it. Oh, quit being such a little bitch, I barely touched you, she said, shaking her head. Barely touched me. Look, woman, I don't know if you break your arm in 3 places every day for fun, but I'm actually sane. He yelled at her as his forehead dribbled with sweat. Anko smirked, and her eyes flashed with a deadly gleam in them. Oh, you don't think I'm sane, Irika-kun? She asked in a sickeningly sweet voice that sent chills up and down his spine. But still he glared at her. You're following that lunatic, so yeah, you have a few screws loose. Anko shrugged. He killed Orochimaru. So it really doesn't matter to me what he does from here on out. So you'll follow him even if he leads us to another great war? He asked with a raised eyebrow. She smirked. He killed that snake. So yeah? I'm with him until the end, no matter how this plays out. A Hyuga walked in through the door. Anko-san? Naruto-sama requests your presence, he said, bowing. She nodded and stood. As she made it to the door, she paused. And who knows, a world of peace might be good for a change, she said before leaving the academy teacher alone. Irika looked thoughtful for a moment before he leaned back on his bed and looked to the ceiling. A world of peace, huh? Kakashi sipped a bit of sake from his saucer. Want another? He asked as he extended the saucer to Guy, who sat across the table from him. The green beast nodded and took the saucer, pouring himself some more of the alcoholic beverage. He shoved it down in one huge gulp. So what now? He asked, somewhat subdued. Kakashi shrugged. We made our choice. Now we gotta play it out till the end. Guy sighed. Kakashi looked at the green-clad Jounin. You're worried about your students, aren't you? He nodded. Kakashi swirled his sake. Let them be for now. Time is the only thing that can heal that particular wound. He drank through his mask. They'll be fine. Guy nodded, pouring himself another drink before smirking at the copy ninja. You do realize I defeated more opponents than you did in that last battle, don't you? Did you say something? Kakashi said, peeking up from his book. Galahaha! Damn you, Hataki! He yelled, startling the birds in a 5-mile radius. Tenten knelt, setting down a bundle of flowers on a small, simple collection of stones Lee and herself had placed. Also on the stones was a picture with their third teammate, Niji. Tenten felt tears prick the back of her eyes and bit her lip in order to keep from crying out. Lee saw the girl's shoulders tremble slightly and placed a comforting hand on her. Come on, Tenten-chan. I'll take you home. Naruto sat at his desk in the middle of the night, staring absently at the bright moon that hung over the city of Konoha. His hood was down, but his mask was still in place. A knock was heard at the door. Enter, he commanded. The door opened, revealing the former Sound 5 along with one Hataki Kakashi and one Midorishi Anko. Good you're all here, he remarked, standing, tossing Kakashi one scroll and Kimimaro another. The two elites caught the scrolls and looked at them. They stared back at their leader, who began to explain. Oto is all but non-existent with the loss of Orochimaru. You 5 were influential when he still held power. You are to go and recruit ninja, he said, looking at the 5 former Sound ninja. You are not to return here until you have a force of at least 30 at minimum. Am I understood? He asked with authority. They each nodded. Good. Now Hataki and Midorishi. Your mission is simple. You are to infiltrate Kiri. Disguise yourselves, I don't care what. Kiri has been locked in a civil war for over a decade. You are to go and discover which side has the greater chance of victory, as well as which side is the more complacent of the two. Report back here in 2 months. You all leave by at least 2 days' time. They each bowed and left the room. Naruto leaned back in the chair and closed his eyes, settling himself into a meditative state. More plans needed to be made. Hinata calmed her breathing as she stood in front of the waterfall behind her family estate, practicing her water-based techniques. It always calmed her after a troublesome day, and today was no different. The position of clan head and all of the responsibilities that presented themselves with it. Naruto had essentially left Hyuga affairs within the Hyuga affairs. Meaning essentially that she had to oversee the reconstruction herself. She sighed. When a rustle in the leaves to her right was heard, she took a stance with the Jukin. Who's there? She recognized the intruder. Shino? She asked with a raised eyebrow. What the hell was her former classmate doing here? Her question was answered as he held up a small jar. The bug colonies of my clan suffered casualties. I've been assigned to help recruit some more. Oh, she said simply. As an awkward silence descended upon them, she resisted the urge to shuffle from foot to foot. Finally, after several seconds, she spoke. Do you need help? Maybe Mike can find the bugs faster. He pushed his glasses up and she twitched in annoyance. In case you didn't notice, Shino, it's the middle of the night, there's no need for glasses. She didn't say this and merely kept quiet. Finally, after a moment, he spoke. If it is not too much trouble. She smiled and nodded. Near Suna, the group of genin, civilians and some Chunin and Hyuga main branch members that had managed to escape the massacre trekked through the dunes Sea of Wind country. Hana was carrying a small child that had collapsed from exhaustion. They had been moving for 3 days straight, They were exhausted both physically and mentally. Ino, who hadn't stopped crying, was being helped by Shikamaru, while Chuji and Sakura helped the civilians as best they could. The Chunin were in front, and the remaining main branch Hyuga were covering the rear, keeping their Byakugans active in order to make sure no pursuit parties caught them by surprise. Suddenly, however, the sand seemed to sprout up in a great wall to the rear, right and left of the group. The civilians panicked, the ninja drew their weapons, but all eventually found their eyes on one Sabaka no Gara, who stood at the only opening available to them. Konoha Shinobi. He spoke, his voice calm and collected. You have some explaining to do. Meanwhile, somewhere in the forests, a young girl staggered across the foliage, her form covered in sweat, blood, dirt, and leaves. Her hair matted against her forehead in deep red and brown, showing the dried blood on it. She held crystalline blue eyes, her right arm twisted at an awkward angle, and her breathing was labored. Every step she took was more painful than the last, as if someone was taking fire and running it up her leg each time her foot touched the ground. Her lungs burnt like the flames that had consumed her mother. Each movement brought a sharp pain that coursed through her arm with every abrupt movement it made, like the blade that had cut down her father. She tripped and collapsed, no longer having the strength to stand. She merely lay there, as her breathing became shallower, and the edges of her vision darkened. Dark like the black void one stared at when they looked upon him. Her head throbbed with pain, as if someone was pressing down on her skull with crushing force like the gauntlet that had crushed her brother's skull. She blinked, and as she opened her bleary eyes again, a dried leaf colored a fiery orange-red fell before her. Red like the eyes of the demon that had taken her family. As her eyes rolled to the back of her head and her consciousness finally left her, she barely heard a faint call of Tsunade-sama before nothing. Chapter 18, The Aftermath Part 2. In the village of Suna, the Konoha refugees had set themselves up in the market district. Due to the circumstances, the council of Suna had provided their rooms free of charge until they were able to reach a decision. Inuzuka Hana walked into the room that was shared between her and her brother. He was sitting cross-legged at the edge of the windowsill. Akamaru was laying on his belly, in subdued silence on his lap as Kiba absently scratched his head. Hana stepped forward, her footsteps echoing quietly off the walls. Kiba suddenly spoke up. She's not coming, isn't she? Hana looked to her feet, trying to push back the tears as pain shot through her chest. She knew the reality of the situation. Most of their family had been cut down. Only Kiba, herself, and 3 more Inuzuka remained, along with whatever others had sided with the opposing faction, which was about a dozen or so. She silently walked to her little brother and wrapped him in a hug. He clasped one of his hands over hers, his shoulders shaking as he tried to hold back tears. Hana placed her forehead on the base of his neck as tears leaked from her eyes as well. Akamaru whimpered in sadness as the salty scent reached him. He nudged Kiba's hand, offering what little comfort he could. Shikamaru sighed as Chuji, himself, and Sakura stared at the blonde-haired girl who had not spoken a single word since their arrival. Not even her mother, who was equally distraught, had managed to get her to speak. Shikamaru had become something of a support for his teammates, hiding the pain of his father's passing in order to help them cope, letting his tears fall only when he was alone or in the middle of the night, in his sleep. Chuji was still in a form of shock, or perhaps disbelief, and still hadn't been able to fully wrap his mind around his own father's death. He knew, somewhere in the back of his mind he knew that even when they were talking in the Hyuga mansion that it was his way of saying goodbye. He just couldn't accept it. Sakura had been trying in her own way to help them out, being that her parents were civilians they left with the group. She felt terrible for her friends. She didn't know what to say or do really. What could she really say? She couldn't say she understood, because she knew she didn't. Her parents were both alive and were volunteering in the hospital to help treat some of the remaining injuries the survivors had right now. She didn't understand their pain, and so she wouldn't pretend to. Chuji moved to step forward, but Shikamaru's hand on his shoulder stopped him. He turned to his lazy friend with a confused gaze, but he merely shook his head. "I'll deal with it." He sighed tiredly. Sakura nodded and grabbed Chuji's hand. "Come on, Chuji. Let's leave them alone and see if we can help out at the hospital." "Yeah, sure," he absently said, walking alongside her, waving at Shikamaru, who waved back. Shikamaru sighed again as they left, and he walked into the room. He sat down at the edge of the bed, next to her. "Ino?" he prodded. She gave no answer. He sighed. "Ino, come on, this is unhealthy," he said, holding back his customary mutter of trouble. She still gave no answer. He sighed. He then stood to leave, but her voice stopped him. "Why did they stay behind?" He paused and sighed again. "Because if they ran, the enemy force would have caught up to us. They had to protect us." She bowed her head, placing her forehead on her knees, letting her blonde hair cascade forward like a platinum waterfall. "So it's our fault?" Shikamaru snapped his head to her. He walked around the bed and sat in front of her. He firmly but gently gripped her shoulders. "Ino, listen to me." He paused, trying to find the right words. "Your dad loved you, right?" She nodded. "Don't you think he would be angry at you for blaming yourself for his death, when there was clearly nothing you could do?" "But..." "Ino." He firmly cut her off. "There was nothing you could do, there was nothing anyone could do," he said, somehow both for himself as well as for her. She muffled a sob in her throat as her shoulders shook. "It's not fair, it's not fair, it's not fair," she continued to repeat over and over again as she shook her head. Shikamaru slowly wrapped his arms around the girl as she continued to cry. Slowly he felt her arms wrap around his waist as she buried her face in his chest and wept bitter tears of loss. Meanwhile, in the Suna council chamber, several individuals were locked in an argument. These recent events make it abundantly clear that we must reinstate our alliance with the Leaf Village immediately. If the eyewitness accounts have any merit at all, then that means they possess a ninja that can single-handedly wipe out at least 1/3 of our ninja. Not to mention that a good portion of the ninja he faced were those of the renowned Hyuga clan. If we could somehow arrange a political marriage, then surely... "Are you insane?" another cried out, cutting him off. "This fool intends to lead a war across the nation. If we ally with him, then we will surely be dragged into this war which is impossible to win. What we must do is attack Konoha now while they are weak. It is the perfect opportunity to increase our influence along the Central Forests region. We could nearly double our income." "No, you fool, even if we somehow are victorious against this new Kage they have, we must also defeat Jiraiya of the Sannin and copy Ninja Kakashi. Surely even if we win, our forces will be so decimated it will take years to get back our former strength. It is reported that this is the same individual that managed to defeat Gaara-sama." The entire room grew silent at that. It was no secret that none of their ninja could beat Gaara. That a Konoha ninja was capable of such still left a bitter taste in their mouths. Some of the council members turned to the young redhead who had been watching the proceedings from a seat he held, from time to time, now that his father was dead. "Gaara-sama," one man queried. "You will be taking the title of Kazekage in a few months. What do you think of this?" Gaara remained silent for a moment, contemplating the pros and cons of such a decision. While he did feel some form of personal respect and even a debt to Konoha's Jinchuriki, as the future Kazekage, he had to put the safety of his village before his personal beliefs. This decision was quite literally the future of Suna. This could either go off magnificently, or it could all just blow up in his face. He had to be very careful in this. He took a deep breath and spoke. "As of right now, there are still too many variables. Too many complications that could appear due to either decision. I suggest a wait-and-see approach. Depending on future events, we will make our decision then." He spoke calmly. Mutters were heard throughout the room, some positive, some negative. He didn't really care that much. As long as they remained in line, they could say whatever the hell they wanted. "What will we do with the refugees?" Gaara sighed. "Should Konoha shinobi come looking for them, then we will hand them over. Until that time, we will provide refuge for them." More mutters were heard. He ignored them all as he stood. "I assume that is what you wished me to discuss with you. If that is the case, then I will take my leave." He turned and walked out the door, leaving the councilmen to themselves. Temari sighed tiredly as she flopped down on her bed. All day she and Kankuro had been assigned the D-rank mission of getting the civilians into their quarters and helping carry the injured and near-dehydrated individuals to the hospital. Her hands still felt the sting of wooden slivers as she had carried that damn stretcher to and fro for about an hour. Before she could drift off to sleep, a voice from the corner of the room reached her ears. "Tired?" She jumped about 3 feet in the air, which is remarkable considering that she was laying down. She fell off the bed and into a tangled heap of limbs and sheets at the edge of the bed. She glared up at her brother's look of boredom. Don't do that, she ground out through gritted teeth. Gaara merely raised an eyebrow. Do what? Temari snarled before picking herself up from the ground and sitting on the bed. What the hell do you want now? Gaara sighed and leaned back on the chair. So you think it's the same guy? Temari stiffened before looking away. Red hood, black clothes, 2 swords and gauntlets. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's him, she muttered. That Konoha ninja was one she would never forget. Gaara sighed. He wasn't even the official Kage yet, and already he was hating the job. It was so much easier just to be an underling. The boss pointed and he crushed whatever it was in his sand. Simple. Why did he take this job again? He sighed and looked at Temari. What do you think I should do? She sighed, laying back on her bed. I don't know. You're no help, Temari. He muttered. I wonder. He sighed after a while, catching her attention. What? She said. A world of peace, is it at all possible? He said almost wistfully as he stared at his hand. Temari looked at her brother oddly for a moment before sighing. Gaara, it might be, but it's a long shot, especially with his methods. Gaara continued to stare at his hand until finally, after a good long moment, he spoke. If there is ever a world of peace, then people like me and him won't exist anymore. Temari stiffened and looked to her brother. She wanted to speak, but the words simply slipped past her as he opened the door and walked out, leaving her alone to her thoughts. Meanwhile, somewhere along the borders of Konoha and Kumo, someone was beginning to wake up. The young girl groaned as she opened one of her exhausted blue eyes. She raised her hand to touch her head, but gasped as her hand came in contact with the rough texture of a bandage. Her eyes snapped open and she scanned the relatively plain room. She began to panic slightly as she didn't recognize her surroundings. She took a deep breath and thought, all right, don't panic. Calm down and figure out where you are, then you can panic all you want. She made her plan and tried to sit up, but the action proved to be far more difficult than she expected. Finally, after almost 30 seconds of struggling with her sore muscles and aching bones, she was finally able to sit up, panting and sweating from the stress to her battered body. She couldn't believe how much effort that took. Again, her lungs seemed to burn with each breath she took. She heard the door open and she turned her head in time to see a woman with short black hair enter. She was startled when she saw her up and rushed to her bedside. Oh my, I didn't expect you to be up yet. Please lie down again, you have to rest. The muscle relaxants in your system still haven't worn off, and if you exert yourself too much you may damage your muscle ligaments more than what they already are. The girl allowed herself to be placed back down on the bed and coughed a little. Where? The woman's eyes softened. My name is Shizun, you're in a hotel in a small town along Kumo's borders. What's your name? Aoki na. Her eyes fluttered closed, and she once again fell back asleep. Shizun sighed as she ceased the flow of chakra into the girl. She certainly didn't expect that she would wake up so soon. She should have been out for about 2 or 3 more days. Her wounds were serious. A minor concussion, the right elbow was fractured, a large gash along her stomach, just barely missing her organs, her left ankle was also sprained badly, and she was suffering a terrible case of exhaustion. The door opened again, revealing a woman with long blonde hair and 2 pigtails. How is she? Shizun sighed. Well, she woke up. Tsunade looked startled. That shouldn't have happened. Shizun sighed. Yeah, well, she was sitting up and looking around when I walked in. Tsunade mused as she sat down. I wonder what happened. Shizun plopped down and absently petted Tuntun as he walked up to her. Whatever it was, it must have been bad. Tsunade nodded and absently sipped some sake. They wouldn't get answers until she woke up. Naruto absently read a report from some ninja that had gone to AC rank mission when Jiraiya leapt in from the balcony. You called? He said, rubbing his eyes. The old pervert was no doubt sleeping. Naruto looked at Jiraiya before speaking. I want you to find your old teammate. Ask her to join us. Jiraiya stiffened. And if she refuses? Then make sure she will at least not get in our way. The toad sighed in relief. He wouldn't have ever hurt Tsunade, not even on his order. He nodded and leapt away. Naruto went to look through another file when he noticed the tower was eerily silent. He stood and walked to his door. He opened the door and noticed the Umbu guards and the administration employees were all knocked out, sprawled on the floor completely unconscious. There was no smell of blood in the air, meaning most likely that no one was dead. He looked down the hall and noticed a blue-skinned man with a large sword on his back. He recognized him almost immediately, the monster of Kyuri, Hashikage Kisame. He turned his head slightly and peeked back into his office from the corner of his eye and saw another individual standing behind his desk. Uchiha Itachi. Chapter 19, Akatsuki. Naruto looked from one end of the hallway to the other. Itachi and Kisame stared back at his red and black form, one apathetic, the other with blood-lusting excitement. Two of the most feared S-class criminals in the known shinobi world in my office. He mused aloud before looking at their attire. Ah, I see. So the reports are true then. He mused calmly before looking at the Uchiha. There really is an organization after the Bija. Itachi stepped forward. Uzumaki Naruto. He looked around the office before looking back at him. I see you have become rather important in my absence, demon of Konoha. Naruto said nothing, he merely continued to stare at the Uchiha with his cold blue eyes. The murderous prodigy spoke again. You know why we're here. He stated simply. Kisame picked it up where he left off. So we can do this the easy way, or he grinned and placed a hand on Samahida's hilt. My way. Naruto turned his eyes to the second Akatsuki member, and with speed Kisame barely caught the ninja who had closed half the distance between them with one sword already ready to swing. Itachi's first instinct was to use a fire, but the problem was A, they couldn't attract too much attention, and B, Kisame was in the way. So he unsheathed a wakizashi on his back and rushed forward intent on catching up to the youth. Kisame knew he wouldn't be able to unsheath Samahida in time to block, and so he placed his forearm in the way. Naruto's blade dug deeply into his skin, stopping at the bone. Kisame curled his lip, but showed no signs of pain. His other hand was already in a motion to cleave him with Samahida. Naruto stepped back with one leg, managing to do so in time to dodge Samahida as it came down. Wooden splinters flew as the blade hit the ground. Naruto held his blade firmly in Kisame's forearm and used his free hand, delivering two quick punches to the shark's face. He pulled his hand back and in one smooth motion he unsheathed his second scimitar, gripping the weapon in a reverse grip. A clang was heard as Itachi's wakizashi hit his blade. He pushed the blade up and swiped at the Uchiha's legs. Itachi leapt up and threw a kick at the blonde face. Naruto leaned his head forward, dodging the kick. He then raised his blade again and hit the back of Itachi's knee with the hilt of the blade. Itachi gritted his teeth against the pain. The impact put him parallel to the ground, still in midair. Naruto then raised his leg and moved to kick him in the chest with an axe kick. Itachi caught the attack, using it to pivot himself in an awkward backflip, up, over the leg, and landing on his feet. Naruto then wrenched his other blade free from Kisame's forearm and leapt up just seconds before Kisame took a horizontal swing that would have cut him in half. He stuck to the roof with chakra and crisscrossed his blades to block a vertical strike from the fish-like Akatsuki member. He felt the ceiling buckle slightly beneath his feet at Kisame's raw strength. He turned and blocked another strike from Itachi, twisting the blade around. He made an opening in Itachi's stance and took it. His scimitar entered the Uchiha's stomach just as he burst into ravens, which scattered black feathers all over the place. He pushed his blade down and leapt off the roof as dozens of kunai, thrown by the Uchiha, hit the spot he had previously been occupying. As soon as he landed, he was forced to block Kisame's Samahida again as he swung. Even so, the force of the blow sent him crashing through the wall into the other room. Kisame went to follow, but as soon as Naruto saw his figure through the newly made hole, he catapulted back out, slamming into the blue-skinned man with a very hard shoulder tackle that sent Kisame through the opposite wall. He turned and again blocked Itachi's strike with one of his blades. He used the other to take a swipe at him, but Itachi managed to block that with his wakizashi. Naruto continued to attack, his moves fast and precise. A flurry of metal and sparks was all normal individuals could see. Slash marks were formed throughout the length of the hallway as the exchange continued, eventually leading back into the office. Now with more space to maneuver, Itachi could get a breather. He sidestepped as Naruto came in with a downward swing, slicing his own desk in half in the process. Itachi appeared again behind him, stabbing him in the back, the wakizashi blade poking out of his chest. He growled low in his chest and delivered a hard elbow right into Itachi's gut, then raising his fist up, punching him dead in the face. Itachi recoiled from the blow, but managed to twist the blade and pull it out. Naruto turned and delivered a brutal kick to the Uchiha's gut, sending him clear across the hallway, down to the reception desk. Naruto threw his swords, stabbing them in the floor about 2 inches deep. He then made some fast hand seals and let his arm fall to his side, where 4 large snakes came from each of his sleeves. Thrusting his hands forward, the reptiles practically flew down the hallway, streaking towards the Uchiha prodigy. Itachi threw several kunai and shuriken towards the approaching reptiles, but they merely twisted themselves out of the way, hissing as they continued their charge. Itachi muttered a curse under his breath and let his eyes shift to the form of the Mangekyo. Amaterasu! Black flames exploded from his eye sockets, streaking down the hallway. The wood withered and burst into flames as the black fire passed over it, incinerating the snakes and instantly turning them into ash. Naruto released on his snakes, and grabbed the 2 swords stabbed into the ground at either side of him. Picking them up, he focused both wind and fire chakra into each one of the blades. Katan, Daibakuha no Tate. Fire release, great exploding wall. Flames came from his blades, the heat making the papers in the office behind him combust. Due to the compressed space, the wall of flames extended down the hallway, forming a virtual pillar of fire that headed for the Amaterasu. The 2 attacks met with an explosion that seemed to rock the whole tower. Naruto's flames offered resistance for a few moments before they gave way to the power of Amaterasu. Itachi covered his eyes as the explosion momentarily blinded him. When the explosion finally died down, he looked and saw the entire hallway was in ruins. He was about to step forward when the ceiling behind him exploded in a shower of splinters. He spun around just as a clawed gauntlet caught him by the throat, bringing him down and pinning him against the floor. Itachi leaned his head to the side, barely avoiding the sword that stabbed itself where his forehead once was. He lifted his leg and kicked Naruto in the back, making him roll forward. Itachi got to his feet and turned, his sword already swinging. Naruto caught the blade with his metal gauntlet and pushed it down with his left hand. With the sword in his right, he took a quick stabbing motion to Itachi's face, making the Uchiha prodigy lean to the side. He pulled back and stabbed again, making Itachi lean to the other side. They continued this for a few moments, before Naruto swung horizontally. Itachi ducked under the swing, still keeping a firm grip on his wakizashi before he delivered a powerful punch to Naruto's gut, making him hunch over slightly. The Uchiha then stood up, and delivered a strong knee to the boy's face, sending the blonde Jinchuriki reeling from the blow. Itachi then grabbed him by the throat and forced him to look him dead in the eye. Tsukiyomi. Itachi was the prodigy of the Uchiha clan, often being hailed as the one stronger than the legendary, and was the first person to wield the power of a Mangekyo Sharingan in well over a century, also knowing more ninjutsu than even Hatake Kakashi. So it was no real surprise when the Uchiha knew for a fact that the second he entered the world of the Tsukiyomi that something was not right. He didn't know what gave it away, perhaps because the world was not responding to his commands, perhaps because he couldn't feel the mental link he possessed which allowed him to control the illusion, or perhaps it was the fact that instead of facing the normal Naruto, he was facing a much more sinister version of the blonde. Naruto's grin widened to almost insane proportions as he raised his claws. So this is the entertainment my container has provided me with. Naruto chuckled to himself, his red eyes glinting in the shadows of the Tsukiyomi. Itachi suddenly knew who he was facing. The Kyuubi. The legendary demon chuckled as its grin widened. It flexed its razor-sharp claws and spoke calmly. "Come boy, if you can provide me some good entertainment then I will let you leave." Itachi narrowed his eyes. He knew the chances of him beating the great demon in anything, even in the world of his Tsukiyomi, were very, very slim. So he had no choice other than to play along, since dispelling the technique didn't seem to be working. He rushed forward to the kitsune at incredible speeds, his wakizashi glinting eerily in the red lights of the Tsukiyomi. He swung with a downwards, diagonal swipe, but the kitsune fluidly moved out of the way. Itachi looked behind him to see the grinning fox floating back. Itachi spun on his heel and rushed forward. However, instead of attacking with the wakizashi directly, he threw the weapon at his red-eyed opponent. Kyubi swerved to the side, his smile still firmly in place. Itachi appeared in front of the kitsune and plunged a kunai in his right collarbone and twisted it savagely. Kyubi kept on smiling even as blood escaped the corner of his mouth. He grabbed Itachi's forearm, holding him in place and digging his sharp claws deep into the flesh. A bright red fireball formed on Kitsune's free hand and he slammed it into Itachi's chest, sending the Uchiho prodigy flying back. Itachi coughed up blood and clutched his chest in pain, but quickly ignored it and righted himself in midair, rushing back at the kitsune with almost desperate fervor as he took out 2 kunai and engaged in taijutsu. Claws and metal met in furious and bloody slashes. Itachi did the best he could, but still received terrible lacerations along his forearms, his left hip, right shoulder clear across his stomach and down from the left side of his chest down to his lower right ribs. With the use of the Sharingan he managed to catch a view of an opening and seized it, shoving the kitsune away with a harsh kick that connected to the red-eyed devil's face. Kitsune's back hit a tree within the illusion world. Itachi rushed forward and with blinding speed he plunged 2 kunai into the kitsune's palms, running them straight through and stabbing them deep into the bark of the tree, effectively nailing him there. Itachi pulled back and scowled as he saw the kitsune's infuriating smile was still there, annoying the fuck out of him. 6 kunai were gripped in each hand. He let a smirk cross his lips before he threw them all, hitting the kitsune in every major vein and artery in the human, upper torso anatomy, including both lungs, liver, kidneys, heart, stomach and throat. He was still smiling. Itachi scowled as he saw the form chuckling softly, the rise and fall of his shoulders evident from a distance. He walked over to his discarded wakizashi and gripped it firmly before walking over to the kitsune. He stared straight into the animalistic slits that were dancing with sick glee before swiping the great demon's head clean off, blood left as if it was a fountain. Itachi let his eyes follow the head before he spun and kicked it as it fell, sending it to another tree, his wakizashi following shortly behind, plunging into Kitsune's skull. He was still smiling. Itachi resisted the urge to shudder. Turning his back on the corpse he began focusing on dispelling his technique. It didn't work. The tiny hairs on the back of his neck stood on end as he heard a chuckle coming from behind him. "Oh, but little Uchiha, I said that you could leave, when I was done having my fun." A very dark and demonic voice came from all around him. Itachi spun around to where the corpse should have been. Note that the key word in that last sentence is should. Only his wakizashi and various kunai remained embedded in the trees. He turned back around and saw the red chakra forming a humanoid shape, which quickly revealed the fanged grin and glowing red eyes. Only this time they seemed much more demonic as they glowed with an unholy light. "And I'm not done having my fun yet." Itachi leapt back, in a somersault. Reaching his wakizashi he gripped it in a reverse grip and rushed the kitsune again. Kyubi rushed forward as well, his claws flashing. They passed each other in an instant, appearing on the opposite sides of where they respectively were. Kyubi straightened and smiled just before his arms fell off, cut cleanly from the body. Itachi looked over his shoulder and smirked at himself, but it died as red chakra shot from the wounds and quickly regenerated the lost limbs. Kyubi turned around, its unholy red eyes and gleaming fangs were the only things visible on its face. Looks like I failed that time. But don't worry, little Uchiha. We still have 71 hours 59 minutes and 59 seconds to go." Naruto, knowing that Itachi was currently trapped in a world of his own creation, reared back his blades in preparation to kill the murderous prodigy. Just then Kisame crashed through the wall in front of him to his left, Samehida already swinging, while his free hand grabbed Itachi and pulled him away. Naruto leapt over the blade in a cartwheel-like motion, landing on his feet. He backhanded Kisame in the face. Kisame snarled and caught his wrist before he pulled it back. He spun around, taking Naruto with him in the motion, and slammed him against the wall. Naruto vanished in a puff of smoke. Kisame turned again and blocked the 2 blades that would have taken a chuck out of his ribcage. Pushing the blonde off, he then swung, aiming for the boy's upper torso. Naruto ducked and then moved into Kisame's follow-up swing, close enough to render his large blade ineffective, and plunged his sword into Kisame's stomach. The shark man, however, had a slightly different anatomy than humans. The blade would have pierced his kidneys, causing a painful death. If he had been a normal human, but his kidneys were a bit higher than normal humans, and so Naruto ended up not hitting anything vital. Kisame punched the blonde square in the face, sending him crashing into what remained of his desk. He was about to step forward, but then he heard a thud behind him. He turned and received the biggest shock of his life that night. Uchiha Itachi, the most feared missing nin alongside Orochimaru, was laying on the ground, blood seeping from his mouth. His pupils were dilated and the Sharingan slowly faded into black obsidian. The Shark Man sensed the approaching presence, and knew this was one fight he couldn't win. He hoisted his partner over his shoulder, and both immediately vanished in red wisps of smoke. Naruto calmly walked out of the rubble and took his blade from the floor, sheathing it. He rubbed his sore jaw and managed to turn his gaze into one of apathy just as the Umbu and Jounin entered the room. The masked individuals looked at the wrecked room and turned to their as of yet unofficial Hokage for an explanation. Naruto adjusted his jaw and spoke. I want all Umbu search teams to comb the village. Your targets are two S-class criminals, Uchiha Itachi and Hashikage Kisame. Capture alive if possible, if not, dispose of them. He looked around the room once and get someone to clean this mess up. Yes, sir, right away. The Umbu captain saluted before they all vanished in a puff of smoke. Naruto rubbed his forehead. He would definitely have to up the training programs. What good were the guards if they arrived after their leader was dead? Chapter 20, Akina. Flames. Deadly, purifying flames. She had been here before. That night at the Hyuga compound. Her mother, a woman she loved with all her heart. She didn't know what had happened. One moment they were simply talking, the next fire. Fire came as if the gates of hell itself had opened, allowing them forth into the world of men. She didn't know what had happened next. It was all too fast. But she could remember. She was lying on the floor, blood covered her form and her arm was throbbing with pain. She had looked up and her father along with her brother were fighting someone. She didn't see his face. Only the blood-red cloak that covered him. She stood, struggling against the pain that shot through her. She had started running towards them, her feet pounding against the moist earth. She ran as fast as she could, but the distance seemed endless. She remembered hearing a muffled scream. The darkness in her vision faded and she saw the person in red, holding her brother by his face. She had heard her father yell out something, a curse most likely, but she didn't hear it. All she heard was the sickening crack of her brother's skull and the blood that she saw flow from both his left and right temples, down his face, his eyes, his ears, dripping down his chin to the cold floor below. She had seen red then. Her only thought was the objective: to kill the one in the red cloak. To stop the flames. She had rushed in then, and both her and her father fought with everything they had: kunai, blades, shuriken, explosive notes, genjutsu. Everything they had in their arsenal. But it was over so quickly. She had felt a terrible pain across her stomach. When she looked down, she was kneeling, and blood was traveling down her waist, to her knees, and into the floor, pooling where her knees met the floor. She clutched the bleeding injury with her hands, and looked up, as her father's body hit the floor with a dull thud. His eyes, panicked and fearful, turned themselves onto her, and he whispered one word. Run. Before the blade pierced his neck. She looked up again and met the burning, blood-red eyes of that monster, and for the first time in a long time, felt true terror, a gripping fear that tightened around her chest and froze her in place. As their gaze did not break, her father's last word continued to scream in her mind. Run. 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 Run, 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 run. Finally, she did. She stood and she fled. As fast as her feet could carry her, she fled, and the screams and cries of other ninja continued to reach her ears long after she flew from that place before finally fading into nothingness. But those eyes, those terrible crimson eyes of hell, that held within them the same glow of the burning flames around her, those stayed with her. And they would never fade. The young girl awoke painfully, much like the last two times she'd been conscious. Her mind was clouded, but she knew the surroundings were somewhat familiar, so she managed to stop her growing panic. She sat up weakly, vaguely recalling that it was much easier now than what she had remembered it to be the last time. She looked around, ignoring her blonde hair that fell over her eyes, obscuring her vision slightly. She found a black hired woman sleeping on a chair a few feet away, a book loosely held in her hand as her soft snores reached the girl's ears. The creak of a door opening startled her, and she turned to see a blonde-haired woman entering. She paused for a moment as their eyes locked before she made a gesture for her to keep quiet. She walked over to the sleeping brunette and removed the book from her slack grip. She set it on the table before picking her up and setting the girl down on the couch. Standing up, she walked over to her. Sitting at the edge of the bed, she looked at the younger blonde, with a look that managed to be somber, sympathetic, and serious at the same time. "How do you feel?" Akina looked down. "Fine, I guess," she muttered. "Do you have pain anywhere?" Tsunade asked again. "Like your head, chest? Anywhere at all?" she ventured carefully. Akina shook her head slowly. "No." Tsunade nodded. From her body language and verbal responses, along with her injuries, it didn't take a genius to know she had been in a terrible fight and had most likely lost someone important to her. "Would you like to get cleaned up?" "Yes, please," the younger girl responded. Tsunade nodded, helping her throw her feet over the edge of the bed. The girl tried to stand on her own, but her legs, after almost 2 days of pure abuse and 1 more week of no use, made her limbs like jelly. Tsunade rushed forward and steadied her. "Whoa there, you can't be moving on your own yet," the older blonde said sympathetically, and placed a glowing green hand of chakra onto the girl's stomach as she saw her wince, and instinctively placed a hand over the area in pain. "Shizen told me your name's Akina. Is that right?" The girl, now identified as Akina, nodded. Tsunade smiled. "Good, my name, in case you didn't know, is Tsunade." Akina's head snapped up towards her, her crystalline blues widening in surprise. "Of the legendary?" Tsunade nodded and smiled before she slung the girl's arm over her shoulder and gently led her to the bathroom. "Come on, let's get you cleaned up." It was only a few minutes later that Tsunade had the tub almost full with steaming hot water. She dipped her hand into the steaming liquid, testing the temperature. Really, I don't want to be a bother, I'll do it myself," the blonde girl stated meekly. Tsunade stood and dried her hands and walked over to the young girl. "Give me your hand," she said, extending her own hand. Akina promptly did the same. Tsunade gripped the younger girl's hand in her own. "Squeeze my hand as much as you can," she ordered firmly. The younger blonde tried, but she could barely clench her fingers. Tsunade spoke up again. "You've just woken up from an anesthesia-induced sleep. The effects still haven't worn off. You could trip and bash your head in there, so I'll help you until the muscle relaxants wear off. Don't worry, I've seen much worse bodies than yours," the older medic said with a sly grin. Akina blushed but nodded rather reluctantly, and began undressing, allowing Tsunade to help ease her into the shower. She hissed as the steaming liquid hit her stomach wound, which was now nothing more than a gash with dried blood and some signs of healing. It would definitely be scary. She shoved her head down, wetting her hair before rising again. Tsunade sighed and sat down on a small stool. "Listen, I don't want to sound too forward or anything, but not knowing is killing me. I know you came from Konoha, your headband and ID identify you as a genin, graduated just 2 years ago. What happened? Did a mission go wrong or something?" She shook her head. She really didn't want to talk about it, but another part of her wanted to say everything. She then remembered that it was Tsunade, one of the legendary Sannin. She hugged her head, letting her now wet mop of blonde hair obscure her eyes from view. "I don't really know all the specifics. All I know is that things started getting crazy after the Chunin exam." Tsunade listened through the story with bated breath. Many of the things she had just heard just threw her for a loop. Both Sarutobi and Orochimaru were dead. A kid, the alleged QB container and Konoha's own personal demon on a leash, had overthrown the council, and nearly half of her home village's population was either dead, Kia, or missing in. And her last remaining teammate Jiraiya had helped in this? This was just too much. She shook her head and spoke. "What will you do once you're healed?" The girl tensed for a moment before speaking. Her voice was an angry whisper. I'm going to train. As long as it takes, I'll train until I'm strong enough, then I'll kill him. Tsunade took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and rinsed off the last of the soap on the younger girl's back before she moved to pick her up. Wait. Tsunade paused, listening to her. I think I can do it on my own, she said slowly. Tsunade shook her head. The after effects would take another 2 or 3 hours for us. She stopped as the girl's brow creased with effort as she used both her arms and her legs to stand up. Tsunade moved forward and helped her stand the rest of the way. But she knew something was up with that display. She never messed up dosages, or medical times. The girl should be nothing more than a limp hunk of meat. She decided to store that in the back of her mind and began helping her to dress. When Tsunade emerged with Akina, Shizen was beginning to wake up. Oh my, I'm sorry, Tsunade-sama, I didn't mean to fall asleep, she said, standing and bowing her head apologetically. It's all right, Shizen, can you keep Akina company? I think I need to get some sake, the older woman said half-heartedly. Shizen nodded, immediately knowing that her master was distressed, and let her eyes travel to the younger girl. She could be no older than 13 or 14, her hair was a dark shade of blonde, and in a certain light could be seen as orange. It was somewhat spiky, with a few bangs over her eyes and the rest cropped back in a spiky ponytail. She was wearing a simple tank top now, with beige shorts and black ninja sandals. Shizen smiled at her, and she tried to smile back, but failed slightly. The brunette moved in and helped lead the girl to the bed, where she sat down with a pained grunt. Tsunade left them. She really needed a drink. Shizen smiled at the girl. Are you hungry, or thirsty, Akina-san? She asked politely. Akina was about to say no, since she didn't really want to impose, but her stomach decided to speak for itself, letting out a very loud, very embarrassing growl. She blushed, her cheeks turning a healthy pink. Shizen laughed lightheartedly. I'll take that as a yes then. Akina smiled slightly and nodded, as long as she could distract herself. Shizen walked over to the kitchen and grabbed some half-warm takeout food, not exactly the healthiest choice, but it would get food into her stomach. Shizen walked over and handed the girl some of the leftover lo mein Tsunade hadn't finished the other day. Akina, despite the food being cold, practically inhaled it. Shizen blinked at the way the food simply vanished from the plate. She laughed somewhat awkwardly, but she was spared further speculation and embarrassment as Akina spoke up. Where did Tsunade-sama go? She asked, looking around. Shizen shrugged. Don't worry, Tsunade-senpai can handle herself. She may have gone to a bar. Or Shizen suddenly paled and Akina immediately grew alarmed. Shizen-san. What's wrong? The next thing the blonde knew, a tornado had suddenly torn through the apartment building and Shizen was nowhere to be seen. Only her voice could be heard in the wind. Gatego. Akina blinked olishly at the spectacle. What? Seeing as how she was going to receive no answer, she decided to rest, but as soon as she let her lids fall over her eyes, those blood-red orbs flashed into view and she sat straight up. She gulped down her fear, and immediately replaced it with anger and determination. She would get stronger. Naruto let a slow smile dance on his lips, as he read the reports from the Sound 5. They had returned with nearly double what he had asked for. Indeed, there were several that merely wanted to kill him, but Ibiki's cross-references had pointed them all out and had them discreetly eliminated. Many of the senior Leafs, meaning the people that had been born and raised in the Leaf village, did not take kindly to the newcomers. Naruto now had Root Umbu patrolling the inside of the village to stop fights from breaking out. While they were few, he did not need the extra headache. While those new batches of Chunin and Jounin were getting settled in, another report had arrived. This was Kakashi and Anko's report of the Mist Village, and the intelligence was quite pleasing. He chuckled before clicking a button on his intercom. Bring me Hataki Kakashi, Yuhi Kurinai, Abirame Shibi and Hyuga Hinata. Yes, Naruto-sama. Chapter 21, Plans for Kiri. Naruto shifted through more mission reports when one of the Hyuga who were working administration in the building walked in and bowed. Naruto-sama, the ninja you requested have arrived. He nodded. Good. Send them in. The Hyuga nodded and bowed again before walking out. Moments later, Kakashi, Kurenai, the Aburame clan head Shibi and Hinata, clad in robes befitting her as the new matriarch, walked in. Good, you're all here. He drew while standing. The reason I have called you all is because I have decided to begin the first stages of my plans. And the 4 of you are necessary for it. We will head to Kiri. If all goes according to plan, then the Mist Village will fall right into our hands without even a single battle between our forces. Everyone looked at each other incredulously and were seriously considering that their leader had gone mad, but they had said the same thing when he proposed to attack the Hyuga compound on his own. So they decided to grant him the benefit of the doubt. Shibi was the one to answer. And how will you accomplish that, Naruto-sama? Kakashi, please explain the situation Kiri is in right now. Naruto commanded. The copy ninja straightened and spoke. When we went to Kiri, Anko and I quickly learned the obvious. The place was practically in ruins, the Mizuki's forces on one side and the remainder of the 7 swordsmen on the other. The war has been around for a few years now, so the civilians in that area are all either miserable or drafted into shinobi duty. While the 7 swordsmen have stronger troops, they have less resources and funds than the Mizuki, which has slowly been giving him the advantage. Right now, it looks as if in a few months' time the 7 swordsmen will be defeated. The shinobi on both sides are complacent. One side believes they should surrender instead of die needlessly, while the other side is sick and tired of the fighting. Naruto nodded. We will use the complacency and civil unrest of the population to our advantage. As Kakashi stated, the side with the 7 swordsmen is losing simply because they have less resources from which to draw upon. We will alleviate that problem. Shibi nodded. I see. Then they will be in our debt. Naruto nodded. We will provide them assistance. In exchange, they cannot name a Godame Mizuki, and instead they must name a Jounin Oiban, much like Kusa and Aim. Our ninja will oversee operations there. The overseers, as they will be called, will consist of a team led by a Jounin. They will be switched once every year so they do not begin to feel too attached to the Kiri Nin, and the Kiri Jounin commander will hand them reports of the village situations once every 3 months. The overseers will also make sure there are no movements against us, especially not by the Jounin Oiban. Kurenai spoke up now. Naruto-sama, you cannot possibly believe that they will simply hand over control of their country. Even if they did, they would only bide their time to stab us in the back when their strength returns to them. She argued. Naruto nodded. Both are good points. However, not every plan is without risks. This is simply the one with the least amount of long-term complications. Fighting a war with Kiri will diminish us to the point where we will not even be able to sustain ourselves, much less conquer the 4 shinobi villages. This will not only increase our influence in the south, it will also add to our income, manpower, and will grant us control of Kiri's powerful navy, which can only be rivaled by Kumo, and even then Kumo's is much smaller and less experienced. Shibi nodded. I see. But I am still confused. Kakashi and Kurenai's roles are already stated, but what possible benefit would my presence and Hinata-san's presence grant? You are for a much more practical use than Hinata, I admit. You are to use your entire hive of Kikaichu and actively spy on the enemy, granting us intelligence at a very quick rate, defensive weak points, strong locations, as well as where the Mizuki is at all times. And me? Hinata asked, ticked off that he had said she was not to be of practical use. While you will not be serving a practical use, or combat use at this time, your use will be placed on your political value. Once we do this, word will spread, and word will reach the other ninja villages quite quickly. It will not be long before they also hear that the Hyuga clan head, Hayashi, is dead and has been replaced by a girl no older than 13. Many will think that the Hyuga clan has grown weak and will therefore think that we are weak. By going on this mission, you will handle yourself as a clan head should and make the Kiri ninja believe that you are most certainly not weak, which will reduce the likelihood that Kumo or IWA get any ideas of attacking. In order to make sure you are ready, I will grant you a signed leave of absence from active duty. Kakashi will train you in these 2 weeks before we depart. Hinata looked at Kakashi, who seemed a little surprised but smiled at her nonetheless. Shibi spoke up next. Naruto-sama, I request to take another of my clan members on this mission. Which one and for what reasons? My son, Aburame Shino. I believe that he could use the experience this mission has to offer. While I can extend my Kikaichu to cover most if not all of the village at one time, it takes a great amount of concentration. One that my son has never used before. You can think of this as somewhat of a training exercise for him. Naruto thought about it for a moment before he finally replied. Is your son at least Chunin level in stealth on his own? Shibi paused before nodding. Yes. I believe he may even be a little above that if he tries hard and the conditions are right. He could even be considered high Chunin. Naruto nodded before speaking again. Very well. Now, if no one else has any questions, then you may leave. Make preparations to depart in 17 days. Hinata, Kurenai and Shibi bowed and began leaving, Kakashi granting the Hyuga the time and place of where they would meet. After they had left, Kakashi turned to Naruto. What is Hataki? Naruto said, leaning back in his chair. You know, after you take Kiri, if you even get it, you can't just immediately go and attack another country. Do you take me for a fool, Hataki? Naruto scoffed. I must first stabilize my power in Kiri, and then gain the adequate number of troops, supplies, funds and resources before I begin another campaign. Besides, he looked out the balcony towards the marketplace where the people were going about their business. I know that a normal shinobi can only take so much combat before he finally snaps. He looked into the Sharingan wielder's eye. Isn't that what you were going to say? Kakashi leaned back in his own chair and sighed. Yeah. He looked at Naruto again. You say the words, but you don't really understand them, do you? Naruto was silent for a long while before he spoke again. My entire life has been a battle. I fought battle after battle until I was feared by all, as a devil in human form. He looked at Kakashi. Even you, to some degree, see me as a demon, don't you, Hataki? He smirked as Kakashi didn't answer. No, Kakashi, I do not understand. But perhaps that will change someday. He mused silently before standing and leaving his office. Minato-sensei. He mentally sighed. What have we done to your legacy? Meanwhile, in a dark lair, 7 robed figures gathered together. Are you serious? One voice, which belonged to a silver-haired man with a 3-bladed scythe and a forehead protector, asked incredulously. He actually beat the both of you, while also defeating Itachi's Tsukiyomi. Another voice, this one coming from a very tall man with pupilless eyes, a face mask and a bandana with the Waterfall Village symbol over his head. That is disturbing. Another, one with a scorpion tail and hunched form, spoke up. No, that's fucking hilarious, yeah. Another voice, this one coming from a blonde rock-knee, snickered. Kisame growled. You want to come down here and say that you play using transvestite? He said as he moved to grab Samahita. You fish-faced freak. Deidara snarled, moving his hand to one of his pouches. Enough, both of you. A female voice spoke up, entering the room. She looked to the still silent leader. I have treated him. He will hopefully awaken in a few days' time. The leader nodded and turned to one member which looked like a Venus flytrap. Zetsu. I want you to gather as much information as you can on Kyuubi's. His strength is troubling, but nothing we cannot handle with the proper information. Zetsu bowed before speaking. Of course. He seemed to fade away as the leader turned to the rest of the group. This changes nothing. We will continue with our plans accordingly. Do not approach the Kyuubi Jinchuriki in open combat unless the odds are very favorable. They each nodded before silently fading into the darkness. The leader let his eyes travel to the giant statue of a bound humanoid figure in silent contemplation. Uzumaki Naruto, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Will you be the one, I wonder? Will you be the one that brings this world into ruin? Tsunade was currently on her 9th bottle of sake, drunk as hell. She was drinking for a number of reasons. One was the death of her sensei, another was simply for the situation that had fallen over her home. Jiraiya was yet another reason. She felt sort of betrayed by him. How could he side with someone like Naruto? He couldn't possibly believe that he would succeed in his ambition, so there had to be another reason. Another major reason was that girl, Akina. She reminded Tsunade a little of herself back when she had lost Dan and Iwaki. Throughout her entire story, Tsunade felt the memories that she had long ago tried to bury resurface. In a nutshell, she could relate to the girl. And she hated it. Just as she was about to reach for the 10th bottle, a hand firmly grasped her wrist. You know, Haim. That's really bad for your health. She looked at the silver-haired man that stared at her with a neutral expression. Jiraiya. She glared. Chapter 22, moving forward. Naruto and his team of 5 and 2 genin silently skulked through the shadows of the night near the hidden mist village. Kakashi was leading the team through the proper route while Kurenai had placed a strong over all of them to keep them hidden. Currently, everything was going according to plan. They had slipped past the border guards with little problem along with the troops belonging to the current Mizukage, and were near the main headquarters of the remaining 7 swordsmen. Kakashi suddenly had a strange thought occur to him. Naruto, who did you leave in charge of the village while we're gone? I remember that Jiraiya wasn't around. Naruto paused for a moment in his stride before continuing rather quickly. You need not worry, Kakashi, it is being handled accordingly. Kakashi shrugged without giving it a second thought. If Naruto said it was being handled properly, then it was being handled properly. Meanwhile, back in Konoha, a certain purple-haired jounin growled low in her throat, her eyes flashing a gold yellow much like her old sensei as she glared at the pile of paperwork in front of her. Oh, that fucker was gonna pay for this. It wasn't long afterwards that Konoha Nin could see a Japanese-style mansion at the top of some shrine-like steps. The shifting shadows and thick mist surrounding the area gave way that several which were adept at the silent killing technique were currently present and on guard around the compound. Naruto gestured for his subordinates to come closer. Kurenai, drop your, we've arrived. The secrecy was only needed so that the Mizukage would not catch wind of this. The mistress hesitated for a moment before nodding and the around them fell. Naruto turned and began making his way up the steps of the shrine. It wasn't long before mist encircled around him and the 5 individuals behind him. He stopped as he reached the top of the stairs. The mist dissolved and roughly 24 ninja were now surrounding them. What business do 6-leaf ninjas have here in Kiri? Asked a large man as he stepped forward. He was about 5'11" to 6 feet. He had a customized chest plate armor with sleeves that were fit more as a priest's robes, dark blue in color and baggy samurai-style pants. He had short, straight hair and a full beard and mustache. He also had 3 swords along his back, 2 crisscrossed and 1 going straight down along his spinal column. Naruto allowed his eyes to travel over the group of Kiri Nin before he spoke up again. We have come to speak to the leader of this rebellion, he answered. The man that had approached them looked them over. Your names? He demanded. Naruto glanced back at Kakashi, gesturing to the silver-haired man. Hatake Kakashi of Konoha, copy ninja. He looked at Shibi. Aburame Shibi and Aburame Shino, the clan head and heir of the Aburame clan respectively. He gestured to Kurenai. Yuhi Kurenai, the mistress. And finally Hinata. Hyuga Hinata, the newly appointed clan head of the Hyuga clan. Mutters arose at that. Whispers reached them, not the least of which boiled down to, but she's just a kid. Throughout the small barrage of mutters and whispered disdain, Hinata forced herself to remain apathetic to the world. She would not respond to this simply because that is not how a clan head was supposed to act. Taunts can be ignored and you act only when there's no other choice. At least that's what she had been taught. The commander silenced them all with a harsh shout. Shut it! He looked back at Naruto. And you? Uzumaki Naruto. He paused, the word stuck on his tongue for an instant. Godame Hokage of Konohagakure. Tsunade stared at her ex-teammate's looming form for several seconds before she was able to fully comprehend just who was standing before her. She glared and roughly pulled her hand away from his grasp, bringing the sake bottle to her lips. She took a huge swig and slammed the rice wine on the table. What are you doing here? She snarled. Jiraiya ignored her harsh tone and calmly sat down, serving himself some sake and drinking. I just came to talk, he said, placating. About what? Making me join your little world-conquering club too? She scoffed at taking another swing. Jiraiya paused before he drank some more sake. So you've heard, have you? I suppose that girl told you, eh? He stated simply. The slug narrowed her eyes. You've been spying on us? It was no real secret what the head specialized in. Tsunade in medical techniques and taijutsu. Jiraiya in sealing techniques and summoning techniques that could be used in conjunction with ninjutsu, and Orochimaru in ninjutsu and kinjutsu. Out of all of them, Orochimaru was the best one in stealth, followed closely by Jiraiya and then Tsunade. So it was not too unbelievable that Jiraiya could remain hidden from her presence if he really wanted to. Jiraiya nodded to her question. Yeah, I have. He looked at her then. And as you've guessed, I did come here in hopes of you joining us. Her hand tightened around the bottle and a small crack formed on it as it strained under the pressure. "How dare you!" she spat. "I have no real love for the Leaf Village. But you would burn it down all in the name of this ridiculous notion of peace." Her glare was so intense Jiraiya thought that she would seriously lash out at him. After a moment or two she relaxed, if only slightly. "It won't work. And you disappoint me for thinking for a moment that it would. Get out." She turned her head, refusing to even look at him. Jiraiya stared at her with one of the most serious faces anyone had ever seen on his face. After a good long while he spoke. "I know that you don't really want to talk about the wars we fought, but I feel that this has to be said." He saw her tense and grip the bottle again. One subject that was nearly taboo around Tsunade were the battles between Kiri and Iwa that killed her brother Nawaki and her ex-lover Dan respectively. But nevertheless he continued on with a steady, even voice. "Think about it, Tsunade," Jiraiya pleaded again. "You and I know it better than anyone. First a war with Kiri, 15 years later a war with Iwa, then a minor skirmish with Kumo, and now a battle with Suna and Oto that took Sarutobi-sensei. No matter how many treaties, agreements, alliances and policies we make, they are a fragile alliance at best, which breaks almost every 2 decades and more innocents are lost. But this is something that can bring peace for far longer than just some signed treaty. And if we do things properly, perhaps even centuries of peace can be achieved. Just think of it, Tsunade, no one will ever again have to go through what you went through with Nawaki and Dan." He was using low blows to her defenses, and he knew it, but as a man once said, "The ends justify the means." Tsunade meanwhile felt some of her bitterness ebb away as the words reached her ears. She remembered the pain she went through at the loss of her brother. Her father had taken to the bottle and her mother had fallen into a pit of despair, both losing themselves in their respective pain. Her father, due to the newly developed addiction, fucked up on a mission. Next day, she gets a note, "No more dad." Her mother didn't take it well, and one day she went to sleep and simply didn't wake up. Then Dan came. She had been burying herself into her work, devoting herself entirely into training in hopes of pushing the memories away from her mind. It had worked to some degree, but looking back at it now, she would have eventually snapped from the strain. He had arrived then, and had returned some light into the bleak world hers had become. Just when she was pulling herself out of her depression with Dan helping her, he had to go, and die too. To think that should this boy succeed, that no one ever had to go through what she went through again, chipped away at her resolve. Jiraiya saw the small sliver of hopefulness in her eyes and hid a smirk of triumph. But soon her eyes grew guarded as a small voice made itself known in the back of her head. "What about that girl Akina? She's the same as you. She lost everything to him. And he'll do it to more people. She's just the first of many broken families. And in the end it will all be for nothing because his ambition is completely impossible." Jiraiya noticed the change in her and stood, deciding to make a tactical retreat. "I'll give you 3 days to think it over, Tsunade." That said, he placed his money on the table and left the bar and his former teammate to the chilling night air. Naruto and the Konoha Nin stood in a room with a large table in front of them. 4 Kiri Nins were flanking them, 2 on each side with their commander standing along the opposite corner of the room. After a few minutes the sliding door directly in front of them opened, revealing a woman with messy, shoulder-length brown hair wearing white battle robes with a gold dragon around it, and a strange symbol on her back. 2 short swords were strapped horizontally along the back of her waist. She had a silver tiara on her head replacing the forehead protector, and had the look of a seasoned war veteran even though she could not be older than her mid-30s. "Hidetada," she barked out gruffly. "Who are these people?" The bearded man that had been leading them, Hidetada apparently, answered her. "This is apparently the Gondame Hokage and his personal escort." She immediately looked at Naruto. Just by the way he looked at her, she could tell he, above the others, was probably the most dangerous. She raised an eyebrow. "The Gondame Hokage? I thought that old geezer Sandaime was still in power. So what happened? He kicked and the Leaf didn't have anyone other than some brat to take his place." She snorted and then stared at the black void that shadowed his face with a dead serious expression. "What the hell are you Leafs doing here?" she asked bluntly. Naruto spoke simply. "We have come here to negotiate with you." She crossed her arms in front of her chest. "About what?" Naruto decided that since she would skip the formalities, so would he. "Let us make things clear. You and I both know that without additional assistance you will lose this war against the current Mizukage. We are willing to provide the economical assistance you require. Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. And what do you desire in exchange? Naruto glanced around. Let us speak in private. She paused for a moment before nodding, making a slight hand gesture as the Kirin filed out with the Konoha trailing behind them. When the door was closed and everyone was out of earshot, Naruto turned his icy blues onto the woman leading this rebellion. As I stated before, we are willing to provide the resources necessary for you to gain an advantage in this conflict, and as you have guessed, we do have conditions, namely two. She nodded, telling him to continue. The first is quite simple, since your village will be of no use to me or my goals if you end up destroying your military force. I am to take full control of your troops. Excuse me? She said, half surprised, half outraged. She bared her teeth. Absolutely not. If you refuse, then I will merely walk away and you will lose this war. Naruto stated simply. For him, there was no negotiation for this. For this served two purposes to him. The first was the reason he had stated to her. And as for the second, he needed the respect and fear of the general population of the Kirin. This was the quickest way to achieve either objective. She glared at him heatedly, her lips curled back in a sneer. She seemed to struggle with herself for a moment. In the end, she looked like she had just forced down a very nasty-looking and disgusting piece of meat before she slowly nodded. And the second condition is that once this war is over, you will hand over all matters concerning Kiri's economic and military institutions to me. There will be no Gande Mizukage, and Kiri is to become a territory of Konoha. Her eyes widened in shock and she replied without even thinking. Absolutely not. Naruto closed his eyes. He had been expecting that. A silence descended on them before she spoke. I will agree to the first term but never the second. You will just have to renegotiate. Naruto let a slow smirk tug at his lips. She needed help and she knew it. Apparently she was a good warrior but a bad politician. She had already made the first mistake. No, he stated solemnly. My terms are completely non-negotiable. I am interested in Kiri for its naval ports. In its prime, Kiri easily dominated the entire Eastern Sea. Now there are various ways for me to go about this. You and the Mizukage are of very little consequence. This is the easiest course of action. However, since you are not interested, I will merely take my leave. That said, he turned and gripped the sliding door in preparation to leave when her voice, filled with veiled hate and resentment, reached his ears. Wait. His eyes flashed red as he allowed a slow smirk to cross his features. Chapter 23, Movements in Kiri. The air was cold and heavy with tension in the thick morning mist that blanketed the land of Kiri. As one pauses, a faint sound, so faint it is almost undetectable by human ears, could be heard through the fog. Several squads of Kiri ninja rushed through the forest, taking both the treetops and the forest floor. The commanding unit, an Umbu with a blue dolphin mask, stopped on one of the branches, letting his troops fall on ahead as his second-in-command landed next to him. He turned to the new arrival, signaling him to move on ahead with hand signals. The man nodded before continuing ahead. The commander placed 2 fingers over the two-way radio on his ear. Command, this is Advance Unit Alpha, we are He was cut off as a gauntlet-covered hand wrapped around his throat from behind, cutting off his oxygen and lifting him effortlessly from the ground. He tried to reach behind him to grasp the arm holding him, only to grasp air. Soon enough, a sickening crunch was heard along with a bloody gurgle before a body fell to the forest floor with a dull thud. Naruto observed the dead Umbu fall with cold apathy. His blue eyes slowly turned from his limp body to the retreating backs of the Kirin. He raised his two-way radio and spoke into it, waiting for them to step out of his sight. Proceed. Less than 3 seconds later, a great explosion blanketed the forest, where the ninja had vanished, with fire and ash. The harsh wind and dust hit him, ruffling his cloak and hair in the wind. Naruto-sama, are you all right? A static-filled voice came from the radio. I am returning now, to send the patrols. Kill any that survived. A pause. Of course, Naruto-sama. Temari sighed as she wiped her brow from the sweat that had formed there due to the heat of the sun. It was abnormally hot today, even by Suna's standards. She glanced at the restaurant down the block and decided to make her way towards it. As she neared, voices began making their way toward her, escaping the wooden walls of the stand. She faintly recognized them. It was only a second or so before she entered the stall that she was able to put a face to them. Inside were the 5 genin of Konoha. "So Sakura, what have you been up to lately?" Kiba asked, wolfing down some barbecued chicken as he looked at his former teammate. She shrugged. "Nothing much. I've been volunteering at the hospital, and one of the older medics there, a retired mednin named Chio, is helping me learn some new med techniques." Kiba nodded. "That's cool." He looked to Chuji, Ino, and Shikamaru. "What about you guys?" Shikamaru shrugged. "We've mainly been training with our family scrolls, with one of the jounin that came with us." He chose his words carefully, seeing his teammates hide their respective flinches. Chuji ate some more barbecue as he spoke. "Yeah, I've already gotten the hang of 2 more jutsu." He looked at Ino. "How about you, Ino?" She smiled. While she was still rather subdued in comparison to what she was back in Konoha, slowly she was regaining her former spunk. "I've mastered one and begun to master my dad's mind scramble technique. He invented it and left some pretty good notes, so it's pretty easy." Chuji smiled and nodded as Sakura gave them both a pat on the back, since she was pretty much sitting in between them. Kiba smirked. "Yeah, that's cool. My sis has been training with me, but since she's the oldest, she's had to take over the clan duties. She's been meeting a lot recently with the Suna Council, won't tell me why though." He shrugged as an afterthought. "She's been wanting to get you guys a secure Suna citizenship," Tamari said from her table across from them. Each of the Konoha genin turned to face her. "Huh, hey wait, you're that Suna chick," Kiba said bluntly, making Sakura hit him over the head for his disrespect. "Sorry, Tamari-san, my teammate here needs a lesson in manners," Sakura said, glaring at him from the corner of her eye. Tamari waved her off. "Cut the formalities. Anyway, like I said, your sisters have been trying to secure you a Suna citizenship." "Why would she do that?" Chuji asked, swallowing a mouthful of food. "Because she knows that if any Konoha ninja comes searching for you, then we'll have no choice but to hand you over." A new voice entered the stand, making everyone turn to see Gaara walking in and sitting down next to Tamari. He looked back to them, his sea-green eyes blank and expressionless. "As of right now, Suna has absolutely no custody over you, and despite the fact that our standing with Konoha is less than favorable since Orochimaru tricked us into attacking the Leaf during the Chunin exams, harboring you while you do not have Suna citizenship will work just as well as an open declaration of war, and informing him falsely of your whereabouts will allow them a wide opening to spread propaganda against us to the other villages. Should that happen and we would seek an alliance with another village, chances are they won't even touch us if word like that got out." Kiba stood up, glaring angrily at the Kazekage. "What? Our parents gave everything they possibly could to get us away from that bastard, and you just sell us out if he comes knocking at your door?" "Calm yourself, Inuzuka." Gaara spoke to the raging boy. "I only said it is a possibility, and it is the truth. While I would like to grant you citizenship, I have very little say in the matter since the council are the ones that mainly deal with civilian matters." Kiba glared but huffed and looked away. "Of course you have very little say. You're just a genin." "Actually," Tamari spoke, getting sick of Kiba's attitude, "he's going to be taking the title of Kazekage in 2 weeks. The blood drained from Kiba's face as the entire group of former Leaf genins glared at him. Shikamaru looked at the Kazekage. "So are you willing to give us citizenship?" Gaara took a sip of the herbal tea they had just served him before he spoke. "At the moment I am undecided. On one hand, adding the famous Ino Shikicho clans to our village would be a great asset, as well as the fact that Chio has reported Miss Haruno here having a rather rare talent for medical ninjutsu, and the Inuzuka clan abilities cannot be underestimated either. All of these could add great strength and prestige to our village." But Shikamaru continued, "You're not sure if you can risk open war over this, especially not with this demon of Konoha character." Gaara nodded silently, sipping some more tea. "Indeed." He looked at Shikamaru as he spoke again. "This Uzumaki is not someone I would like to count as one of my enemies." "You'd prefer to have him as an ally," Shikamaru stated simply. Gaara sipped his tea, his whispered words not reaching anyone but Tamari next to him. "Know that I would want even less." The shoji screen door slid open, silencing the occupants on the other side as Naruto stepped in. His red eyes scanned the room. The scrolls, maps, and other documents were littered over a table in the center of the room. Shibi and Shino sat out in the balcony in meditative positions as they listened to the messages their respective hives of Kikeichu relayed back to them, and then they relayed the messages to the Chunin couriers, who then relayed it to either Kakashi, Kurenai, Hinata, the Kiri woman, Mitsuko Jinchiko, or her second-in-command, Hidetada, and then they would relay it to him. That was quite an intricate, and on normal circumstances quite foolish, but this, as many things he did, served a purpose. While Shino and Shibi both had the majority of their respective hives sweeping the enemy's camps and headquarters gathering information, a small portion of each of their hives were crawling around this very base and listening in on conversations the Kiri Nin might be having that would indicate a conspiracy against him. So far, there were only 2 individuals of any real importance: Jinchiko and Hidetada, the 2 most powerful of the remaining 4 swordsmen. If he could eliminate one or the other, then neither would ever really have the strength, politically or physically, to defeat him. He just had to do it quietly. The other 2 remaining swordsmen, a man named Guan Sua and his apprentice, an aggressive girl, worthy of Zabuza, named Tachibana Mika, were not on good terms with either Jinchiko or Hidetada, and while they did not particularly like his takeover, they were mainly keeping to themselves, leaving Jinchiko and Hidetada to conspire and fend for themselves. So the next order of business was to eliminate either Jinchiko or Hidetada. Now then, how to do it? Naruto-sama. The blonde-haired youth turned and found Shibi. The Aburame clan head looked emotionless as usual, but by his body language Naruto could tell he was anxious, which was alarming in and of itself. What is Shibi? He spoke round in order to face him fully. I believe this information you may want to hear yourself before it reaches the other's ears. He placed a hand on the blonde's shoulder and leaned in, whispering the information into his ear. As Shibi pulled back, he could swear Naruto was smirking beneath his mask. Thank you, Shibi, you may return to your duty. The Aburame clan head bowed before he turned and left. Naruto turned to one of the Kiri ninja in the room and spoke. You there, bring me Jinchiko, Hidetada, Guan, his apprentice Mika, and Hyuga Hinata, now. They are needed. The Chunin hastily bowed. Yes, Naruto-sama. Before he scurried away. Chapter 24, Tsunade's Decision and the Double Cross. Naruto calmly moved a branch out of his line of sight so he could look out into the small clearing where his targets would pass. Behind him, Jinchiko, Hidetada, Hinata, Guan, Mika, and Shino, who had requested to join in this mission, rested, along with a squad of over 30 Kiri. Guan was a large man, with a large but well-groomed mustache and goatee. He wielded a single, 2-edged broadsword. He had a height of about 6 feet, wore green battle robes with steel chest armor over it, which was painted green and engraved with gold flame-like designs. He had long black hair which was held in a top knot. His apprentice Mika was the exact opposite. Whereas his appearance could be considered a large tiger, hers was a small swan. She couldn't be any bigger than 5'3", rather lithe and agile-looking. She wore a blue shirt which left her belly exposed. Her pants were also blue and somewhat baggy. 2 swords were on either side of her waist. They resembled a cross between a samurai sword and a Western-style rapier. She was built for speed, not power. She had silver flowing hair and red eyes, which only hinted at the crazed bloodlust beneath the serene exterior. Alright, Uzumaki, what's the big idea dragging us out here without even an explanation? Hidetada spoke, his expression showing his annoyance and resentment for the young man that called himself his commander. Naruto let the branch fall back to its natural position as he turned to the ninja. He once again let his eyes scan over the group before he spoke. It has recently become known to me that the Mizukage has grown alarmed with the number of ninja he has lost over the last 14 days. Therefore he has decided to go and request Kumo for aid in disposing of you. He will be passing by this route with a team of 30 to 40 Umbu as his personal guard. We are here to make sure he does not reach his destination. 30 to 40 Umbu, the coward would leave his people naked and unguarded? Guan spoke from his place on one of the tree branches. Shino adjusted his glasses into place. While he had no delusions that he could take on a fully trained Umbu head-on, his role was much more support than anything. His Kikeichu were already on 2 of the Umbu that were approaching and were already absorbing minuscule amounts of chakra. By the time they actually arrived, those 2 Umbu would have already lost 1/15 of their chakra by his estimation. The rest of his hive was here with him, ready to be unleashed once the battle began. What is the plan? The plan is simple. We will divide the troops into 2 groups of 15. Hinata and Mika will lead one, while Guan and Shino lead another. You will hear the Mizukage in my direction, where Jinchiko, Hidetada and myself will ambush him. The 2 aforementioned members of the 7 swordsmen exchanged a glance which clearly said, "This is our chance." Of course, that would be so much easier if he wasn't planning their downfall as well. He spared a glance to Shino and Hinata and then to a hidden spot in the forest where Kakashi and Kurenai were hiding under his orders. The 2 of them were to guard both Hinata and Shino respectively. They were only to interfere if they truly believed one of them was about to die. While he couldn't afford to have either one of them die, he also couldn't afford to have them appear as if they needed a babysitting. Kakashi had reported that the training he had given Hinata throughout the 2 weeks he had given her before he undertook this mission that she was at a level of mid-chunin without the Byakugan. With it, she was high chunin to possibly even low. Shino's physical abilities placed him to low chunin already with his intellect added to it. He was probably mid-chunin, but he couldn't be sure. Guan was easily above both of them in skill. His apprentice Mika, however, from what he could sense was relatively at the same level, but from the reports of her blood-crazed induced state when she entered a battle could make her very unpredictable, thus, very dangerous. Hinata spoke. But how can you be certain the Mizukage will flee instead of fight? If the first group attacks and the Mizukage decides to fight them himself, then the first group will easily be destroyed. From the reports I've received, the Mizukage is not one for bravery or camaraderie. The chances that he choose to fight the first group head-on, especially in ambush, are much lower than the chance that he will instead attempt to flee towards either safety or to the borders of Kumo. Either way we will manage to catch him, or reduce his forces significantly. His eyes snapped towards Hidetada and Jinchiko as the 2 again shared a look. You have your orders. Get to your positions. Tsunade silently sat in the corner of her hotel room, sake bottle firmly in hand. Her thoughts were in turmoil, and had been so for the past few days or so. Jiraiya's words still echoed in her mind. No matter how many treaties, agreements, alliances and policies we make, they are a fragile alliance at best, which breaks almost every 2 decades and more innocents are lost. But this is something that can bring peace for far longer than just some signed treaty. His argument had merit. It was true that no matter how many peace agreements and signings the villages made between each other, this spiral of war was never ending. But could he do it? Could he truly bring peace to the world? It was a dream at best, and a delusion at worst. And even if he could, just how many more people would he have to destroy in order to do so? How many deaths can be justified with this ambition? Hundreds? Thousands? Millions? And what if he failed? Would it all have been for nothing? Would all the rivers of blood and tears all be for a simple delusion that would simply throw this chaotic world into an even darker abyss of death and war? What justification could he have then? Just think of it, Tsunade, no one will ever again have to go through what you went through with Nawaki and Dan. Her former teammates' words again reached her, and she scowled, remembering how much both herself and her parents had cried when Nawaki died, and then the feeling of cold solitude when Dan had left. It hadn't been fair, and she grew to hate the world for it. Could she save others from such a thing if she did this? Tsunade-sama? A hesitant voice reached her ears. What are you doing sitting in the dark? Tsunade was snapped out of her thoughts in the second sentence. Is it dark? She questioned as she blinked, noticing that indeed the sun had already gone down, bathing the room in its inky blackness. Akina stood at the doorway with some groceries in hand. Where's Shizen? Tsunade questioned as the girl closed the door with her foot. The young blonde shrugged. Don't know, we were on our way up here when she suddenly handed me everything and mumbled something about leading some debt collectors away. Tsunade blushed slightly, realizing that Shizen had, again, saved her from the debt collectors. She watched as the blonde girl placed the overstuffed bag on the table and began putting things inside of the mini fridge. She had recovered remarkably well from her injuries throughout the last month or so since they found her, and these last 2 weeks now Shizen oftentimes had to go and find her to make sure she didn't strain herself too much while training. After a few moments, Akina began to notice the tense aura surrounding Tsunade and turned to face her. Is something wrong? She asked, genuinely curious with even what was considered a hint of worry in her voice. Tsunade was quiet for a moment before she finally started. I spoke to Jiraiya a while back. The younger girl tensed, her back going ramrod straight as she turned to face her. Her expression was hesitant and worried. Since she didn't know exactly what to say, she merely kept quiet, waiting for Tsunade to continue. Seeing that she wouldn't speak, Tsunade decided to continue. He came to offer me a place in Konoha again. The young girl turned her gaze away from the last Sannin. She leaned over the table. I see, she said uncertainly. After a moment she seemed to gather herself, her hunched form straightening out as she once again turned to face the slug princess. Will you accept? She bit her lower lip slightly as she waited for Tsunade's answer. Tsunade drank some more sake, leaned back in her chair and looked her dead in the eye. What will you do if I say I will? Guan sat in a tree, holding his broadsword across his chest as he waited, half-heartedly tracing a stone over the edges. Shino sat nearby, focusing his chakra and preparing his Kikaichu for battle. Guan looked at the young Aburame, as if sizing him up. Finally, after a moment or so, he spoke. I have heard that you volunteered for this mission, young Genin. He started evenly. Shino turned his head to face him. Yes, I did. Guan made a HN sound as he traced the stone over his sword again. Why would a Genin such as yourself volunteer for a mission like this? It would be considered suicidal. So either you are very arrogant, or have another reason altogether for doing this. Shino pushed his sunglasses back into position before speaking. Indeed I did, but my reasons are my own and are no concern of yours, with all due respect. He added as an afterthought. Guan smirked. Indeed it is not. Very well then, Genin, keep your secrets. For the battle is about to begin. As he spoke he stood and examined his sword. Shino looked to the distance, and indeed noticed faint movement beyond the trees. It looks as if they've arrived. Hinata sighed tiredly, if a bit irritated, as Mika's cheerful humming continued to reach her ears, thus grating on her nerves and thinning patience. She turned her head to the girl, letting her irritation clearly show on her face. Will you cut that out? She snapped after a second or two. It's annoying. Mika let her hand trace over the bark of the tree she was standing on before turning her blood-red eyes onto the Hyuga clan head. Oh, so my singing is annoying to you, is it? She smiled, somewhere between a friendly smile and a malicious one. She unsheathed one of her swords and pointed it at her throat. Well, guess what? Your pretty little face and stupid white eyes are annoying me. So how about I carve those out? After all, you are the only leaf ninja here. I could easily kill you and then say that you died in battle? From his place in a nearby tree, Kakashi let his eyes travel to his young student. I wonder if you can handle this, Hinata. Hinata, for her part, did realize the precarious situation she was in, especially when she heard the mutters that spread through the rest of the ninja in their company. She caught a sliver of movement from the corner of her eye. She flared her for a moment, and caught sight of their targets approaching them. She deactivated her bloodline and looked at the silver-haired girl, her face betraying no expression. We don't have time for this. We have plenty of time to miss the Hyuga heiress, Mika replied, her smile growing as she took a step forward. Hinata stomped down the urge to step back and held her ground stubbornly. Glaring at the girl, she spoke again, her voice cold and clipped. Our targets are approaching, so either make your move, you stupid Kiri bitch, or back off. The tension between the two at that moment grew so heavy and thick that one could cut it with a blunt knife. From his perch in the tree, Kakashi raised both eyebrows in surprise. Either she's got a death wish, or she is officially the luckiest person on earth. Finally, after almost a full minute of the glaring contest, Mika smirked and lowered her weapon. Fine then, leaf bitch, I'll deal with you later. Just as she finished speaking, the allied group of Kiri ninja of the other team could be heard as their battle cries reached their ears. Hinata and Akina shared a glance before both leapt away. Naruto observed as the two teams engaged the Mizuki's escort group. But what none of the Kiri ninja knew was that it wasn't 30 umbu the Mizuki had brought with him, but 45. The Mizuki figured that there was a leak in their information network, so in an attempt to lure the leaders of the rebellion, namely, Jinchiko, Hidetada or Guan, into a trap, he spread information that he would be leaving to Kumo with an entourage of 30 men, and then informed his most loyal umbu to take another team to hang back and only strike when he confronted either Guan, Hidetada or Jinchiko personally. Even now he could sense them at the edges of his perceptions. They were indeed masters of silent killing. So all he needed to do was wait for the Mizuki to retreat. The Mizuki's plan was to lure whoever was leading the attack away from the main group and then ambush him or her with the 15 or so umbu. The 15 umbu that would descend on Jinchiko and Hidetada, if all went well. Right on cue, he saw the blue-robed figure break through one of the lines and rush into the forest, apparently panicked. He spoke into his radio. Jinchiko, he is heading in your direction. Hidetada heads to Jinchiko's position. We will ambush him there. Copy. Very well. Naruto put his radio away and rushed after the Mukage. Break through. We must protect Yandame-sama. One of the Kiri-umbu yelled as he moved to rush after the Mizukage. Before he could leap, however, a green blur flashed before his eyes before a terrible burning pain tore through his stomach and he hit the floor, his vision fading into cold darkness. The other umbu all skidded to a stop as the looming form of Guan stood before them, his large broadsword glinting in the light, crimson liquid running down the edge, dripping drops which fell to the grassy floor, staining the earth. Not one soul shall pass here. He raised his sword and stabbed it hilt deep into the earth. Forming a line, pulling it back out, he spun it once over his head before swinging it over the earth directly in front of him. Huge spears of mud exploded from the ground and impaled two of the ninja that were caught off guard by the maneuver while the others leapt back, avoiding the assault. He leveled his blade at them. Those who dare shall meet death. Kakashi watched as Hinata was cornered by two of the Kiriumbu. He was ready to step in at a moment's notice, but his orders were specifically to interfere only if it was absolutely necessary. Besides, she had been handling herself remarkably well, using hit and run tactics and long-range kunai throwing to injure and weaken some of the opposing neens. Her had even caught one of them completely off guard, catching him in the right lung and effectively killing him really. He was wondering how she was going to get out of this one. Hey, look at this one, Ijumasa, it's just a kid. One of them laughed as he looked at his partner. I bet she'll kick your ass, eh? The other one, Ijumasa, sneered at his partner. Fuck you, Kojiro. As he spoke, he stepped forward, ready to run the Hyuga heiress through with his umbu blade. Hinata smirked before she began spinning. Kaiten! What? One of the umbu yelled before the spinning barrier hit them both, pushing them away with great force. They both skidded to a stop as Hinata ceased her spinning. They scrambled to their feet, both thoroughly pissed. Now Hinata was worried. That was a delay tactic, and she knew it. There was no way in hell she could beat two umbu head-on. Hell, there was no way she could beat one head-on. She had to find a way out of this. Alas, her worrying was for naught. As the two umbu began to stand, two wickedly curved blades impaled both of them, entering through the back of their neck and coming out through the front. Hinata looked to her savior and found Mika, with a twisted smile on her face and madness shining in her red eyes. Hee, I told you we'd settle this later, princess. Hinata, though worried, again refused to show it. Instead, she smirked. Do you really think you can beat me? If so, then you're dumber than you look. Mika licked some of the blood off of her swords and laughed. We'll just have to find out then, won't we? Before Hinata could say anything else, Kiri Kunoichi rushed forward, swinging her swords in an attempt to cleave her in half. Hinata leaped up, and over her, somersaulting, she landed behind the silver-haired girl and turned on her heel, ready to use a strike to her spine. Mika swiveled around, on her heel, and swatted her hand away with her left forearm and then swung at her midsection with the sword in her right hand. Hinata backpedaled, narrowly avoiding the attack. As soon as her feet touched the floor again, however, her Byakugan flared to life. The veins around her eyes became more exposed as she naturally settled herself into the Juken stance. She was going to set this lunatic straight right now. The Mizukage was rushing through the trees of the forest surrounding Kiri. As he leapt for another tree branch, he barely managed to twist himself in mid-air in time as a surge of lightning passed right next to him. He growled as he stuck upside down to a branch using chakra. He looked to the forest floor and smirked as he saw his attacker. Jinchiko, he spoke her name with a sneering tone as the white-robed Kunoichi leveled one of her blades at him. Yandame-sama. She spoke in a calm tone as yellow streaks of lightning danced over her two short swords. Foolish girl, why don't you step aside and let me pass? You know you could never defeat me on your own. And who says she's by herself? A voice spoke up to his right as Hidetada emerged from behind a tree. The Mizukage's eyes narrowed at the sight of another one of his hated enemies. Ah, Hidetada, now all of us are here. Not quite. Jinchiko spoke up. Our other friend has yet to arrive. Hidetada finished. The Mizukage snorted. You mean Guan, that imbecile is still fighting the fools I left behind in the clearing, he won't be coming. Oh, we're not talking about Guan, Hidetada said calmly before he looked to the right. Ah, here he comes now. The Mizukage snapped his head in the same direction, watching as a red-robed figure appeared from the shadows of the forests. And who would this be? He sneered at the unexpected arrival before finally catching sight of the leaf headband on his arm. Konoha? He breathed in an astonished voice, before snapping his head back to Jinchiko. You got help from Konoha? Jinchiko smirked at his shocked expression. Indeed, we did you a worthless cunt, and now is the time you die. His lips curled back in a snarl. No, Jinchiko, this is where you die. He raised his hand and brought it down, and the 15 hidden umbu leapt down to the forest floor, 5 of them surrounding Jinchiko, 5 of them surrounding Naruto, and 5 surrounding Hidetada, surprising 2 of the 3. Welcome to your funeral. Beneath his hood and mask, Naruto's smile was lost. Jiraiya slowly parted the blinds over the entrance to the bar as he entered. He didn't pause to spare any of the patrons a second glance, instead choosing to head directly for the person he had come to see. Tsunade let her eyes follow him as he entered, her cup pausing on its path to her lips as she waited for him to join her. Finally, as he loomed over her, he spoke. Have you made your decision? She placed the cup down on the table, calmly ordering the bill before she spoke. Yes. And? A pause before finally. I'll meet with him. Chapter 25, Struggle for Kiri PRT, 1. Jinchiko and Hidetada immediately took up their fighting stances as the umbu surrounded them. Surprise was evident on their features. Naruto, too, acted surprised so as not to arouse suspicion from the 2 swordsmen, unsheathing his 2 scimitars and taking up a defensive fighting stance. The Mizukage laughed at their plight before looking at his umbu captain. Finish them. And just like that, the area exploded into action. Naruto stepped to the side to avoid the sword lunge the umbu behind him attempted, and resisted the urge to just kill him outright. He had to use non-lethal blows until one or both of his most allies were killed. That would be difficult. After all, instinct was a rather troublesome thing to resist. Instead, he swiveled around on his heel and bashed the ninja in the face with the butt of his sword, shattering the porcelain mask. The umbu in front of him attempted a horizontal swing to his neck. Naruto batted the blade away with one of his scimitars, opening the umbu's guard and delivering a solid kick which sent him flying back. He used his other scimitar to block a strike from behind, twisting his arm over his head as he spun around, keeping the blade in place. Once he had fully turned, he used his second blade, and stabbed the man in the foot, causing him to scream in pain and drop the sword. Naruto pushed in until his sword had not only completely gone through his foot, but dug in about 5 inches into the earth. Ignoring the man's cries of pain, Naruto left his blade in his foot and turned, catching another sword in his gauntlet. He pulled him in, and used that sword to block another umbu's downward swing. Umbu pulled back his blade and attempted a thrust at Naruto's stomach, but was stopped as the blonde kicked him in the face, and then kicked the other man whose sword he was holding with the same foot in the chest. He used the momentum of his second kick to lean back, grab the sword he had left in the other man's foot, and flip over it. He pulled the blade out and leapt up to the trees as the umbu were beginning to get their wits back as they chased after him. As he ran, Naruto realized something. If I can lure them away, then I can kill them without Jinchiko or Hidetada realizing it. Then I can return and step in at my leisure. With his plan set, he sheathed his 2 blades and rushed through the forest. Meanwhile, back on the battlefield, Hinata was not having a good time. The Kiri Kunoichi was faster than her movements wild and untamed in her crazed state, giving her a definite edge over the Hyuga girl. But the Juken, a naturally defensive fighting style, and her Byakugan were keeping her in the fight. She took out 2 kunai and began blocking and or dodging the other girl's strikes. She swerved, ducked, and swiveled as she avoided the blows, pushing her reflexes and speed to her limits. She blocked an overhead swing and pushed it over her head. She tried to use her other kunai to stab the girl. Mika avoided it by moving slightly to the side. She then kicked the Hyuga girl in the stomach, sending her stumbling back until she hit a tree. Hinata recovered in time to place her foot against the tree she hit, and use it to leap over Mika as she lunged at her, stabbing one of her swords into the tree. Hinata, not wanting her to gain her second blade again, threw her two kunai while still in midair, making the girl step aside, leaving her sword in the tree. When the Hyuga heiress landed, she drew a single kunai and took to the offensive. She came in with a quick swipe with her kunai, which was blocked easily by the girl's remaining sword. Hinata followed up the attack with 3 fast juken strikes, 1 to the girl's stomach and 2 to her chest. If Hinata was expecting some kind of reaction, it was not what she received. Mika smirked as she coughed up blood. For a moment Hinata truly thought her to be utterly insane, but to the girl's surprise she reared her free hand back, where she caught the barest reflection of light. Ninja wire, but what did she the sword? Just as the thought entered her mind, the sight of the blade entered the visual range of her, the deadly, glinting edge poised to impale her through the chest. It was coming in too fast to dodge. Kaiten! The Hyuga heiress yelled, spinning around as the cyclone of energy exploded outwards, sending both the incoming blade and the Kiri Kunoichi flying. From his place in a nearby tree, Kakashi was very impressed by his student. She knows how to think on her feet. Sometimes in the heat of things you forget your abilities. She's managed to keep a level head throughout the whole thing. Very impressive, Hinata. As the Hyuga heiress ceased her spinning, she barely managed to catch sight of the Kiri Kunoichi before she turned into a puddle of water. Mizubushin, but when did she? Mika's form entered the visual range of her Byakugan as the girl leapt down from a tree branch above her, her sword raised ready to make the killing blow. Hinata turned in time to catch the girl's wrists as she dived. The Hyuga fell on her back and lifted her legs, placing them on the girl's stomach and kicked, sending the girl clear over her head. Hinata flipped back, her legs now straddling the girl's waist as she lifted her hand, and sent a juken strike toward her heart. Mika's smile never faltered and Hinata suddenly found a kunai moving to her chest, towards her own heart. Suddenly the two found their arms held back from killing each other. Hinata spied Guan as the large man held her small wrist with his larger hand, while Mika had her arm held back by a certain Aburame as his foot pressed against her forearm. That's enough. Guan's deep rumbling voice stilled the two women before he looked to Shino. I will take them to the medics and keep an eye on them. You will accompany me. Copycat, you and the Genjutsu woman deal with the mop-up. Kakashi looked momentarily taken aback but let himself drop from the tree as Guan hefted his apprentice to her feet and began making his way to the medics, Hinata and Shino following closely behind. Shino looked at Hinata as she breathed heavily, the adrenaline in her system dying down as the rush faded and her exhaustion made itself known. You handled yourself well, Hinata-sama. The girl jumped slightly at his voice but turned and smiled. Thanks, you cut it a little close though, she said with a mock glare. Shino smirked a little before he turned his eyes ahead once again. Meanwhile Naruto was swiftly rushing through the trees as 5 shadows moved after him. He slowed his pace, allowing them to overtake him and catch up. Even the fool whose foot he had stabbed, though limping, also caught up. Finally, as he made another leap, one of the Anbu made his move. Their paths would intercept in mid-air. Naruto caught his wrist, stopping him mid-swing and punched him hard, sending him down to the forest floor as he continued his run. Another Anbu attacked this time, coming directly at him instead of a sideward angle. Naruto realized that he hoped to stab him as he landed on the next tree branch. It may have worked, if he was anyone else. Using some of his wind chakra to adjust his altitude, he was now beneath the branch, so instead of landing on the branch he swung under it, bringing his feet up in a straight rise. He kicked the man in the stomach just as he passed over, knocking the wind right out of him. Naruto released the branch and manipulated his wind chakra to keep moving upwards as he repeatedly kicked the man in the gut. He then used chakra to stick to the man and literally walked around him, and then used him as a platform to leap even higher just as another Anbu came in with a high kick to the area he had once been. However, due to the absence of his presence, the kick connected with the unfortunate Anbu's face, the same one he'd been using as a stepping stool, sending him upwards, towards Naruto. The sphere of spinning chakra formed in his hand before he slammed it into the man's back, eliciting a cry of pain from him as his insides were twisted and shredded to bits, as he was sent careening down to the forest floor where he hit with a loud crash and great dust cloud. Naruto didn't have time to enjoy his victory before he had to twist himself in midair, as he blocked another Anbu's swipe with kunai. He grabbed the man's forearm, used wind chakra to spin around and sent him crashing into another Umbu about to lunge at him. He continued moving even after he let him go, and kicked the fourth Umbu away before replacing himself with him, letting the man get impaled by the last Umbu's blade. 2 down. He turned, facing the 3 remaining Umbu. They each tensed, knowing just by how he had dispatched 2 of their comrades that he was indeed someone to be wary of. Naruto unsheathed one of his blades, the sword glinting in the sunlight, the edges holding a dull red hue, almost as if it was formed by the dried blood of countless victims that had fallen to its deadly edge. He fell into his familiar stance. The sound of his breathing, hollow and mechanical sounding due to his face mask, sent shivers down their spines. The remaining Umbu, one with a sword, the other 2 with kunai, each spread out surrounding him in a triangle as they took up their stances. "Do you guys need some help?" came a voice from above the trees. The 4 ninja looked up to find 2 more mist Umbus standing above them. "Taro, Masaru, what are you doing here?" "Mizukage-sama and the others have the situation under control. Mizukage-sama sent us to see if you needed backup." One of the Umbus spoke as he looked around, seeing the 2 dead corpses of his comrades. "Apparently you do. If you fools choose to fight, then you will surely die. This will be my only offer to join me, or suffer the consequences of your resistance." Naruto spoke from his place, making one of the Umbus scoff. "Yeah, right, you may have caught us off guard before, but now that we're prepared and Taro and Masaru are here to help us, we'll kill you easily." The Umbu with the sword sneered at the blonde before he vanished, using speed that was very impressive, even by Umbu standards, as he reappeared a few feet behind the blonde. He smirked in satisfaction as he turned, expecting to see the Konohan shaking in fear, but was instead rewarded by his sword splitting in half, as if it had been cut. "He actually cut the sword? But I never even saw him move." "So be it." Naruto's voice brought the startled Umbu out of their shock. "Since you worthless fools are so eager to throw your lives away," he spoke as he unsheathed his second blade as blue chakra began to seep from him, before it exploded in a bright pillar of blue like flames. One of the Umbu that had just arrived swiftly unsheathed his sword before rushing at the blonde, the other 4 following his example after just a moment of hesitation. Naruto leapt high into the air, going above the tree line in a single leap. The first Umbu wearing a sparrow's mask caught up, his sword raised over his head, ready to bring it down on the Konoha Jinchuriki. The next thing he knew, the blonde had punched him square in the face without even turning to face him, and he was plummeting back down to the forest floor. The second, wearing a panther's mask, followed suit. Leaping from one of the trees, he lunged at the Jinchuriki, rearing his blade back before he thrust, only to have the Konohan and somehow flip over his attack. Naruto manipulated his wind chakra to right himself before he delivered a powerful, crushing axe kick which connected at the man's right collarbone. A silent scream of pain came from his mouth as he plummeted down to the forest floor, joining his comrade. The next one, wearing a lizard mask, was next. Naruto simply vanished from his location, reappearing behind the man, and then used him to jump a bit higher, letting him take the blow of the bear-masked Umbu that tried to deliver a haymaker from behind. The bear-masked Umbu looked up in time to get stomped in the face by the Jinchuriki, sending both him and his lizard-masked partner down. On the way, his kunai pouch opened, scattering the metallic projectiles all around the descending blonde. The last Umbu wearing a boar's mask never even had a chance. When he was in striking distance, the blonde replaced himself with one of the scattered kunai. She turned to face him and threw one of her own kunai, only to have him replace himself again. He turned and barely had time to catch a glimpse of red and black before he vanished again. The blonde vanished and reappeared so quickly it looked as if he was everywhere, as he didn't even use the smoke clouds. In the end, the boar-masked individual was so dizzy she couldn't even put her guard up as the blonde reappeared in front of her, slightly higher than where she was before he delivered another axe kick, sending her also crashing into the forest floor. Naruto descended, breaking through the tree line. Not a moment after he did, though, the sparrow-masked Umbu lunged at him again. Naruto twisted himself in mid-air, dodging the man's lunge. Apparently he was trying to simply shoot past him as he cut him, but Naruto had other plans as he caught the man's ankle and pulled him back. He felt the air leaving the sparrow-masked Umbu's lungs as he punched him in the stomach. Hard. The man coughed and wheezed as he tried to force air back into his chest. The blonde showed no mercy as he delivered an uppercut, followed by the blonde manipulating his wind chakra to do a front flip in mid-air, and then delivering another downward kick to the man's head, sending him head first down to the forest floor. Again he felt the panther Mastambu's presence. The lizard Mastambu also approached him from the other side. He turned and backhanded the panther Mastambu, sending him flying, and then simply placed his foot, letting the lizard Mastambu's face connect on its own as the man couldn't move to stop his own momentum. The bear, disguised as Umbu, tried to jump down from one of the trees in order to catch the blonde by surprise. But the blonde again manipulated his wind chakra and moved out of the way, letting the bear Mastambu strike the disoriented lizard Umbu, who was in a simple free fall, sending him down to join the still wheezing sparrow. Naruto then put both hands together, his sword still firmly in his grip, before he brought them down and hit the bear Mastambu in the back of the neck with a sickening snap slash. Naruto spread out his arms, his two swords igniting with his two chakra elements, as he raised them and swung down. Gokakusatsu! Hell's tormenting flames, he yelled as both flame and wind mixed and exploded, blanketing the forest floor in fire. The three Umbu barely had time to scream. And oh! A scream came to his right as the boar Mastambu rushed him, intent on avenging her comrades. Naruto stood on the tree branch, the embers of the roaring flames slightly lifting the shadows that veiled his face, making the Umbu freeze as she met the gaze of her opponent. Those cold sea blue eyes are empty and void of all emotion. Eyes of a machine, one that had killed thousands and caused suffering to millions. Eyes of something much worse than any demon. "What monstrosity are you?" was her whisper before the demon of Konoha struck, his scimitar impaling the Kiri ninja straight through the stomach. She gasped and coughed as he clutched the blade, hoping to stop it from going in further. No such luck. The blonde suddenly pulled up, opening the woman's navel. Blood gushed out like a fountain as she gasped and fell forward. The blonde removed his blade, turned and left her to bleed out, intent on finding the last Umbu. He found the sparrow-masked individual, picking himself up. Apparently, his last flight through the trees had broken his arm, sprained an ankle, and probably broken a rib or two. Naruto walked forward and scented the fear rolling off the individual in waves as he began dragging himself back as fast as he could. Pathetic. The blonde inwardly sneered before he knelt down and grabbed the man by his throat, lifting him up and slamming him against the tree. Shifted the sword in his grip and ready to deliver the final blow. The plea was cut off harshly as his sword cut through the man's throat. Naruto pulled the blade out and resheathed it. He watched as the man's lifeblood seeped out of him. He gurgled a few times before he finally slumped over, dead. The blonde turned and left, heading back to the two allies he had left behind. Chapter 26, Struggle for Kiri Part 2, Burden of Sorrow. Naruto watched with a bored gaze as Jinchiko and Hidetada fought the remaining 5 Umbu. 3 lay dead at their feet. They fought back to back, not allowing their Umbu counterparts to separate them too much. The Mizukage watched with thinly veiled glee as the two began to tire, as was shown by heavy breathing and sloppier attacks. They both had excellent teamwork, he acknowledged. No doubt what had gotten them this far, but still, they wouldn't last much longer. Once they fell, he would step in, defeat this weakling of a Kage, and seize Kiri as he meant to do so. Finally, one Umbu broke the melee and leapt back. Forming his hand seals, he called out his Suetun, Suriyuden. He yelled as he blew out a stream of water which quickly formed into the water dragon. Jinchiko and Hidetada snapped their heads in its direction. Acting on instinct, the two leapt in the first direction. Their legs took them away from each other. The attack had worked. As soon as they hit the ground, the two realized their mistake and tried to reach each other, only to have the 5 Umbu block their path. Jinchiko cursed. They had wanted to avoid this for 2 reasons. The first is because now they were separated, making it easier for the enemy to surround them, therefore kill them, and second is because in order to avoid them getting surrounded they would have to use jutsu, not something you wanted to do if you had to face the age of a nation right after. The only female member of the 7 swordsmen cursed as she was forced to leap back again due to various explosive tags being thrown at her feet. When she landed again, she formed her hand seals without ever releasing her sword before she swung, dragging the tip of the blade on the ground. Raitun, Doki no Ten. Yellow streaks of lightning exploded from the attack, snaking through the earth, leaving a jagged trench as it released electricity everywhere. One of the Umbu formed his hand seals. Suetun, Sujinhiki, he yelled, slamming his hands on the earth, letting the lightning streaks hit it. The lightning was naturally drawn to the water, reducing the attack to barely nothing when it reached them. Jinchiko narrowed her eyes as two of the Umbu charged her, their two blades glinting in the light. Fools trying to beat one of the 7 swordsmen in Kenjutsu. She thought somewhat insulted as she took up her stance. She backpedaled as she blocked the first and second strikes, merely diverting their attacks. When she had led the two on enough so that they fell into a subconscious state of believing she would merely divert their attacks, she dug her heels in harshly. This time she didn't divert the attack, she blocked both completely, knocking them both off balance as they stumbled slightly. She did a quick roundhouse kick, nailing the first one in the face as she continued the motion by smoothly slicing the other's chest armor. She had aimed for his neck, but he had managed to recover quicker than what was anticipated and lean back, avoiding the deadly blade somewhat. She snarled as she went to start her hand seals again when she heard a scream behind her that made her blood run cold. She snapped her head in the direction of the scream and saw Hidetada, with a kunai jabbed into his right side, most likely where the kidneys were. Behind him, holding the knife, was none other than the Mizukage, wearing a cruel smirk as he shrugged innocently. I got bored. She felt her anger rise as she grit her teeth hard and rushed at him. The two Umbu behind her ran to catch up, while the two in front of her moved to intercept her path. Chuseki no Doki, she yelled as she crossed her arms in front of her. Lightning encased her form, making her look like a comet running along the ground. The two Umbu leapt over her to avoid being hit by the jutsu. She dispelled it once she saw her path was clear and leapt up as she raised her sword, lightning dancing and crackling around it. If you attack me, you'll kill him too, the Mizukage yelled out to her. Her eyes narrowed and grew cold as she swung anyway, the streaks of lightning flying from her sword to the ground below like a shower of electricity. The Mizukage leapt away as the lightning fell. To his surprise, the lightning fell around Hidetada and the location where he himself would have been. It appears she had been bluffing. Before he could do anything, Jinchiko landed near Hidetada, picked him up and leapt through the trees, vanishing into their shadows. After her, he barked. Don't you dare let her escape, he yelled angrily. His Umbu nodded before they rushed after the female swordsman. Naruto watched as she ran before he silently followed, always in the shadows. Come on, damn it, don't you dare die on me, you hear me, you worthless moron, Jinchiko said as she carefully examined the injury. It was deep, very deep. It spurted blood every few seconds and truly looked fatal. He chuckled, ignoring the blood that rose into his mouth. You seem awfully worried over this worthless moron, he said, chuckling before he coughed lightly. Just shut up, she said as she rummaged through her pouch for her first aid equipment. He halted her search as he placed a hand on her wrist. She looked at him surprised before he waved her off. Don't act foolish, Jinchiko, my time's up, we both know it. Get out of here while you still can. She growled angrily as she continued rummaging through her pack. You're a moron, a delirious one at that, so just shut up and let me work. He grabbed her wrist again, stopping her. Jinchiko, please, he whispered hoarsely. She stopped in her attempts. She bit her lip hard as she forced the tears back. Naruto watched the scene from above, his speed and greater sense of smell making it very easy for him to find the two before their pursuers. She sighed in agitation, masking the pain she felt for her dying friend. Damn you, she whispered harshly. Hidetada smiled at her harsh tone. Promise me one thing, Jinchiko. What's that? She asked, her voice going softer as she closed her eyes. Promise me that you'll live beyond this day. So he paused as he coughed blood. That you can fulfill our dream. Since I won't be able to help you. She smiled softly down at him. You're still hooked up on that dream of yours. Ever since Sensei put it in your head. He smiled and nodded. Damn straight, he said, coughing more blood as he slowly moved his hand to grasp her own. Naruto watched the display with cold apathy. Not even fazed by the man's dying words and increasingly laboring breath. He sensed the presence of the Umbu approaching. Soon, it would all be over. Promise me, Jinchiko, promise me that you'll live and bring peace to Kiri. Bring peace to our land. Naruto stopped, taken aback by the request. Remembering the Sandame's last words to be almost the exact same thing. Did this man and Sarutobi share the same dream? He was brought out of his musings as the stinging smell of salt reached his nose. He looked down to Jinchiko's silently shaking form. She was struggling to hold back the tears. It was then he noticed that Hidetada was no longer in the world of the living. She was a good kunoichi, Naruto conceded as she took steady breaths in order to calm her emotions, recognizing that now was not the time for it. Naruto was so wrapped up in his thoughts that he didn't even see the kunai that approached her until it was too late. Judging by her scream of pain, either did she. The blade hit her left shoulder. Blood seeped from the wound freely as she pulled the weapon out with a grunt of pain. Naruto debated whether or not he should interfere. In the end, he decided to hold his position for a while longer. Jinchoko stood, holding her injured shoulder as she turned and glared at her attackers, the Mizukage and his 5 remaining Anbu. How careless of you, Jinchiko. I merely intended that to be a warning shot. She cursed as she threw the bloody knife at him. He caught it between his thumb and forefinger easily as he smiled down at her, savoring this moment for all it was worth. Kill her, he said simply, and the Anbu at his side immediately sprung into action. She held her sword in a defensive stance as best she could with her injured shoulder. Hidetada, I can't promise I'll live beyond this day, but she paused as she looked up to the Mizukage's smug face. Maybe killing him will make you dream of a peaceful Kyrie a reality, she said with hints of determination in her voice. Naruto watched her. Something about her stance had changed. Whereas before there was defiance, anger, and a bit of fear, now there was only resolve and acceptance. Of what? Her death, perhaps? Then what was the resolve he sensed? The desire to take them with her? He let his eyes travel to the still form of Hidetada. The man simply lay there, his expression, one of peace yet also an underlying sadness in his features. Does she fight for him, perhaps, to fulfill your last request? Just as I fight to fulfill Sarutobi-sama's final command? He again let his eyes travel to Kiri Kunoichi. Or is it something else? He was brought out of his musings as Jinchiko began to glow bright yellow. Then electricity cut through the air around her form, encasing her in a high-voltage field of chakra. This technique, she is consuming her bioelectric energy. If she keeps this up, she will most certainly die soon. Jinchiko glared at her attackers, the Anbu having ceased their charge at the sight of her technique. For a moment, all was still until one of the Anbu took the initiative and formed his hand seals. Suryuden no Jutsu, he yelled as he gathered the moisture from the surrounding mist. Using water against lightning was always dangerous. It had a 50-50 chance that it would work or backfire terribly. It all depended on which attack held more chakra. When the dragon hit the field of electrical chakra, it simply exploded, scattering the small droplets of water everywhere. Jinchiko used a minor distraction and shot forward. Her lightning-encased form appeared as nothing more than a yellow streak as she headed straight for the Mizukage. Doton, Dwarya-hiki, another Anbu yelled as he slammed his hands onto the ground. A wall of solid rock came between her and the Mizukage. She didn't stop, and simply tore through it like a wrecking ball through a building. She kept moving, her gaze set determinedly onto her target. The Mizukage sneered as she neared him. The high voltage seeped into the air, making his skin tingle and his fingertips sting. He began forming his hand seals. Attack, destroy her now. He yelled out his order, causing his bodyguards to form their own hand seals as they flanked him. Naruto watched as earth, fire, lightning, and water techniques were launched at the charging woman in rapid succession. They each seemed to bounce off the field of electrical energy as she charged straight through them. To most, she appeared unstoppable. But Naruto could see and smell traces of charred flesh, hear the snapping of bones and the tearing of muscle and tissue. For a brief moment her charge faltered, before she pushed through with even more vigor. Why? He wondered as he continued to stare. What is it that makes you fight so hard? Is it Hidetada? Or perhaps you are the same as those others? He mused to himself. You took his place, why? Haku coughed up blood, staining the gray floor of the bridge red. Because he rasped out. He is someone I would protect at any cost. Even your own life? Haku nodded, and smiled at the taller blonde. Why? The feminine boy let out a small laugh. You'll have to learn for yourself. That was the first time he had ever seen something of that nature, and it confused him still. What was it that compelled Kiri no Knin to surrender his own life for Zabuza? Kill me instead. He remembered the girl from Suna. She had cried out to him, begging for him to spare her brother. even offering herself in his place, practically throwing herself in front of his blade. What was it about these individuals? What gave them such drive to simply surrender their lives heedlessly? He let his eyes travel to Hidetada again. What causes these people to do this? Meanwhile, the Mizukage and his Umbu had just finished another volley of, and still Jinchiko's charge didn't stop. The Mizukage glowered and was about to leap up in order to get out of the way, but nearly lost his balance as his legs kept themselves firmly planted on the ground. What the I can't move. But how did she do it? He paused in his thoughts as looked to his feet, seeing many small electric strings holding him in place. But how? No one can manipulate lightning to such an extent. How did she? He paused as he realized that the lightning was coming from small water droplets, the droplets that had spread around the area from the water dragon used earlier against her. She was using the small reserves of her chakra in the droplets to manipulate the lightning now holding him in place. It wouldn't hold long, but long enough for her to reach him. His Umbu leapt out of the way, not noticing that their leader was stuck, leaving him alone. He made a move to form more hand seals, but it was too late. She picked up speed. The ball of lightning slammed right into him. He barely had enough time to scream before he was engulfed in the ensuing blast. Naruto and the Umbu each covered their eyes from the bright light and braced against the harsh winds. When it finally died down, the sight that greeted them was a burnt, very dead Mizukage. Jinchiko stood over him. Her arms and legs were damaged badly, blood seeped from her mouth, indicating internal bleeding. Her heartbeat was erratic at times, beating dangerously slow and then speeding up dramatically. Her entire body was twitching badly as she fell to her knees and threw up. Vomit and blood mixed as her sword fell to the floor with a dull clattering sound. All the while Naruto observed, his gaze focused intently on her. He suddenly caught the smell of salt. She was crying. Possibly from regret that she did not try to escape, or that she was dying, he expected. But what she said next surprised him. At least I managed to keep part of my promise. I'm sorry, Hidetada. Her thoughts slowed as she collapsed on her side, her breathing becoming shallower and shallower as her heart suddenly stopped. She had used up so much bioelectricity that her brain could no longer send messages to her body enough to keep her conscious. But Naruto could see from his perch that her features were not sad or angry, but rather happy. She was smiling despite everything and even the pain she must be in. She was still smiling. What causes you to smile this way, Jinchiko? What is it that allows you to do so? The remaining Umbu leapt down, the captain of the group approaching with his sword ready to make sure she was dead. He raised his sword, but that's about as far as he got before his head was neatly chopped off and the woman vanished. The other Umbu tensed and turned as they sensed a presence. They found Naruto standing there, one hand holding his blade while the other held Jinchiko under one arm. Leave now, and I will spare your lives. Each of the Umbu spared each other a glance before they decided to simply cut their losses and leave. Naruto lowered his blade and spared a glance at the woman slung under his shoulder before he set her down on the floor. She lay on her back as Naruto placed his hand over her chest. He closed his eyes and focused for a moment. This was one of the few medical techniques that he knew. He usually just used it to preserve the life of a prisoner. He realized with some small sense of irony that this was the first time he would use it to save a life just for the sake of saving it. He sent a jolt through her system, trying to jump-start her heart again. He sensed no change in her pulse, so he did it again. Again nothing. He did it a third time and heard her pulse. He listened for a moment, and heard her breathing. It was shallow and unsteady. If she was to survive, then he had to get her to the medics. With this thought in mind, Naruto sheathed his blade, picked her up and rushed back to camp. It was several hours later that the demon of Konoha found himself waiting in front of a medic tent, where they were currently treating the woman he had saved. He didn't even know why he saved her. Was it curiosity? Was it because her death would have been a waste? He didn't know really, but he had saved her, and yet as he continued to replay the events over and over in his mind, a dull ache grew in his chest. The tent parted, revealing one of the Kiri medics as she wiped her brow. She'll be fine. But we'll have to stay in bed for several weeks before she can do any strenuous action. Naruto nodded. Very well. Inform me when she wakes. The woman nodded and bowed before she went to her other duties. Naruto looked at the setting sun. Its dull orange hue setting the sky ablaze with its light. He turned and left, he needed to think. Kakashi looked over the battlefield. Many ninja lay dead or dying, some groaning in pain while others cried in agony. A relief force had arrived. Earlier, they were meant to be used as backup in case things went wrong, but now they were in charge of mop-up. The Kiri ninja walked around, trying to find survivors from either side. Various cries calling for medics could also be heard among the chaos. He sighed. This is war. He mumbled to himself as he rubbed his covered Sharingan. I had almost forgotten what it was like. He muttered as he looked to the sky. I guess I'll have plenty of time to get used to it again. He sighed again as he turned to leave, but stopped as he caught sight of Naruto, walking among the bodies as he too surveyed the battleground. He stared curiously as Naruto just walked past and entered the forest, seemingly unfazed by the gruesome display before him. He sighed and looked at the setting sun. Minato-sensei, I wonder what would you do? Naruto stopped at the edge of the clearing. Hidetada lay there, in the same place as before. His blood pooled around him, coating the grass a deep shade of brown. He walked over to him and simply stared at his still form. The ache in his chest grew almost uncomfortably. He placed a hand over his chest and wondered what it was. It is called guilt, Naruto-sama. Naruto turned to the voice and found the Aburame clan head as he emerged from the forest. The blonde was only slightly surprised at his presence there. But then his words caught up to him. Guilt, you say? And just why should I feel guilty over his death, Shibi? He questioned. His voice is a slow, bored drawl. Leaving both him and Jinchiko alive was simply too dangerous. I did what I had to do. Shibi adjusted his glasses and nodded. Yes, you did, Naruto-sama. You did everything that you were supposed to do. But you still feel guilty, and naturally so. Naturally so? The blonde questioned. Shibi walked around the clearing, his hands clasped behind him. Naruto-sama, you are a person that has dealt death. Your hands are stained with blood and much of it, but you do not understand it. He paused as he turned to look at the boy. Today, you witnessed what death truly is. You saw her suffering, not just the fear or the anger you have normally witnessed, but her true suffering. Naruto's eyes narrowed. I suggest to Shibi that you keep your insects off of me, he warned, quickly deducing the source of the man's knowledge. Did you know? Shibi ignored him as he continued speaking. After the Great Shinobi War, Sarutobi and Yondaime-sama were in the perfect position to take full control of IWA. Do you know why they did not seize that opportunity? Naruto said nothing as he listened. Because neither of them wished to bear the weight of that guilt. Conquering IWA would only bring destruction, it would only bring more sorrow, and neither of them wanted to bear that burden. He paused as he turned to face the blonde. You merely feel the beginning of that burden. Are you sure you wish to shoulder this thing that will undoubtedly become only all the greater? Even to one such as yourself, with this undertaking, Naruto-sama? Naruto listened, and thought over what was just to him. He squared his shoulders as he formed his hand seals. Katon Gokaki, he whispered before he breathed a stream of flame, incinerating the Kiri. He stared at the flames for a long while, listening to the cracks and losing himself in their glow. He looked to the Aburame clan head. This is a land at war, a world where demons fight. If I must become a demon to end the chaos, then a demon is what I swear to be, and I will shoulder whatever burden that comes with it. He spoke with determination before he turned and left. If I must, then I alone will shoulder the sorrow. Thanks for watching. I hope you had as much fun with this epic what if as I did creating it. Make sure to smash the like button, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a single twist in the story. Drop your thoughts, theories, or even your wildest ideas in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're craving more awesome Naruto content, be sure to check out the other videos on the channel, because there's plenty more heat waiting for you. Until next time, stay sharp, stay awesome, and remember, even a shadow clone needs love. Peace out.